Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Eric, are you on? Eric?
Emerson, I just spoke to Ariel. She is bringing them in right now.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah,
Everyone, just forgive
Yep,
us
there we
for
go.
that.
There we go. Yep, there we go.
My
He
man
just had
E.
me in the room all that time.
Hey, listen, let's go.
Let's go. All right, let's go.
So further ado, my man Eric Thomas. Go ahead, man. All you.
Let's go. All right, all right. So is this a different group?
Different group, bigger group, general session.
Beautiful. So if you guys don't mind, I don't know who is over the host. If you could make me a host, I'd love to share this presentation with the guys. But real quick, I know we're on a time crunch here. I love technology, especially when it works. So what I wanted to share with you guys, I shared with the group earlier, this whole, pandemic, one of the things that I had to do probably about the second or third month in it, I realized we're not coming out of it anytime soon. I was one of those people that was under the impression that, this would be a fall thing. And once we got into the summer with the heat, I know I'm not a doctor, but I bought into the heat myth. And once the heat came, nothing changed. And so it put me in a real bad situation in terms of from a professional standpoint, right? As a speaker, I'm sure you guys can imagine that what I do for a living, and let me do this because I want to make sure you guys can see it. I don't think the other time you guys could see it. I wanted to make sure that as a speaker, as a CEO, I run a successful business as well as a church, and right around that second or third month, of course, everything kind of dried up for us. Being a motivational speaker, I generally speak to, I'd say, audiences of average 1,200, anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000. I did a lot of international work. And so I went from a situation of being able to make 50 to maybe 65 domestically and over 100 internationally. Like all that stopped, right? And so for me, I really had to ask myself, can you pivot and can you still do well, in this recession? And so one of the things that happened for me was, I went back into some of my trainings. I went back to some of the conferences I went to, looked at some notes, got with my staff, and, we really started asking ourselves some real serious questions. Are we going to fold? Will we survive? Will we strive? Will we thrive? Right. And one of the things that came to us was a quote by Winston Churchill, which says, never let a good crisis go to waste. Right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. And so we started to ask ourselves, what are some of the gaps? What are some of the areas that we can fill? So of course, we can't do public speaking because of, social distancing. And I never even knew that was a word. So we go from 5,000, 10,000, traveling all over the world to we're doing absolutely nothing, right? I'd actually walked away from corporate a little bit. I had some appointments in 2020, but I started doing schools. And now, of course, I can't go into schools. So the primary work that I was doing was over, right? So again, Winston Churchill, who was almost annihilated by Hitler, was understaffed, under-resourced fiscally, human resources. But, he knew it was important to keep that enthusiasm, to keep the people inspired. So he said, never let a good crisis, meaning this is real, but never let a good crisis go to waste, meaning that we have to do whatever we have to do to be able to get on the right side of this crisis, right? Again, I shared earlier, there's no absolutes. One of the beautiful things about a crisis is there's no absolutes. My mother-in-law in 2008 was diagnosed with pancreatic colon cancer. It spread throughout her entire body. The doctor said, go home, right? That was 12 years ago, right? My mother-in-law said, look, I got one child. I was never married. I've got two beautiful grandchildren. I want to see them graduate from high school. They went from graduating from high school to graduating from college, right? So she took the crisis and made good out of it. There are other people, when they got that same diagnosis, go home, go or hospice, you got 4-6 months to live, they pretty much checked out. But my mother-in-law was like, I'm not going anywhere. And so she took the crisis and she made the most out of the crisis. So again, no crisis is absolute. And we have to teach people that it's not the crisis that determines the outcome. It's really the individual that determines the outcome, right? And so we know it. Your perspective will either become your prison or your perspective will become your passport, right? And so one of the things that I decided to do as I sat down, I thought about the meeting that I had with Dan Gilbert and Warren Buffett. It was probably Christmas of 2009, 2010. Dan Gilbert, who's the owner of Quicken Loans, 56 other companies, and of course, he owns a basketball team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I remember he invited me to a meeting. Now, at that time, I didn't know why. There were 31 other men, only 2 African-American men in the room. As you can see here, this is me, this is Warren Buffett, this is Dan Gilbert, and Tony Knuckles, the African-American male you see, is the individual that took interest in me and felt like, you have what it takes to do corporate work, corporate keynotes, corporate training, corporate consulting, right? At the time that I didn't see it, right? So he got me into that world. I sat down, pulled out all my notes with Warren Buffett. And I remember Warren Buffett, at that time, he was the second richest man in the world, second to Bill Gates. And I remember Warren Buffett coming during a recession. Now, it didn't dawn on me during that time frame because I was new to a recession. I had a blue collar mentality, a middle class mentality, right? This was the first time I was exposed to a wealth mentality. I was exposed to the way the richest men in the world thought. And as I reflected during this pandemic, I remember Warren Buffett saying that he was in Detroit because it was a recession. And at that time, they literally bought up all of downtown. Between Dan Gilbert himself, they bought up downtown. They literally bought skyscrapers for about $500,000. I was physically in the building. Dan Gilbert had given me an office directly across from his. And I remember the meetings, and I remember the strategizing, and I remember the venture capitals they set up. I remember all the young people who had these phenomenal ideas, and they took 20%, 20% equity from their company, made them pay for room and board. Like I remember it, but I guess at the time, because I had a blue collar mentality, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, I just grew up Chicago, Detroit, my grandfather Gary's, the steel mill. So my whole life, I only thought as an employee. I only thought as a person who worked. But what the pandemic did for me is it made me reflect on that conversation I had with Dan Gilbert. And I began to ask myself, okay, Eric, you can't speak anymore in the traditional sense. You can't do keynote presentations like you used to, but how can you replace that, right? And so again, passport or prison. And I decided to allow the pandemic to turn into a plandemic. And I probably spent 30 straight days with my staff, just planning. So what I came up with, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with this gentleman, but what dawned on me is that I had been working in the NFL. And so as a result of working in the NFL, going to games, traveling with the teams, being in the locker rooms, that was a time in my life where I was doing so well that they were calling me. And so I was very passive as it relates to my income, because I had companies calling me, NFL, NBA, corporate companies, international, right? And so I was doing more, again, motivational speaking, inspirational speaking, right? But then it dawned on me, while you may not necessarily be able to go to Pittsburgh anymore under these circumstances, what you can do is call coach. Like now I went from being passive to being more active. Now I went from having 50 calls a day to me having to make some calls, right? So it wasn't that the money wasn't there. It wasn't that opportunities weren't there for me, but the paradigm that I had when things were well, it was a totally different paradigm now that there's a recession. Now I've got to shift from being passive, you come to me, to now me saying, how can I market myself? Who are the people that I have a relationship with? Who can I pick up the phone and call and ask if there are opportunities? As a matter of fact, don't ask if there's an opportunity. I want you to be able to present to the NFL the different gaps that exist, right? And so here's the challenge. A lot of the young men who were at home, who didn't have the stability of the facility, the stability of having a coach, the stability of their teammates, the stability of the workout facility, the cooks, the chefs, So a lot of these guys weren't able to produce on the level that they normally produce because they didn't have that stability. So I started making phone calls. I started asking questions. I started asking different coaches that I had a relationship with, coach, is there any player that I can work with? So I shift from Keynote to consulting. So I'm still using my enthusiasm, still using my inspiration, still using my ability to be persuasive, still using my Gregorius, but now I'm mixing it with systematic. Now I'm mixing it with being more analytical. Now I'm mixing it with coach. I have a system now. I'm not just the guy that can come in, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I'm not the guy that can come in and just make you want to run through a wall. Coach, I have a system now that will allow you to realize which of your players are going to be able to transition, even in the midst of a pandemic, versus those who may struggle with it based on their personality. So now I can give coaches these personality tests, all right? So it starts to shift. So now I'm calling not just coaches, now I'm starting to call guys that I have a relationship with, Cam Newton, right? When I tell you it couldn't have been a better time, one of the things that we have to realize is that a pandemic doesn't mean that all the opportunities are gone. It just means they're shifted, right? So I get with Cam, and Cam calls me during the time frame in the summer where he's not even signed to a team, okay? And so the need for the motivation and inspiration, the need for Eric Thomas is greater. So we begin to collaborate. Cam's doing his videos so that other coaches can see him. And Cam's putting my stuff behind his stuff. He's putting it up online. Of course, he's getting millions of hits. And now guess what happens? I'm starting to get the phone calls, that I wasn't getting in the beginning of the pandemic. Maybe, in the first quarter of the pandemic, right? Now, as we're going into football season, right? And now, guys Cam gets picked up with the Patriots. Now it's like, oh, there's a connection. We see that Eric Thomas is not only good outside of a transition, but the work that he does can create some type of edge for our players that are playing, right? So again, I begin to work with the NFL players, right? I said, let me expand it a little bit more, right? Call CP3, right? My relationship with Zion Williams, and I work with the NBA players development. So when they went in the bubble, who did they call first? So now I've got to get myself out there. So there was a time where I could kind of, be passive and let people come to me. I'm getting 1,000 calls a year that I can't even fulfill those requests. Now I'm not getting those 1,000. Now I've got to generate and create those 1,000. So it doesn't mean that the money's not there. It doesn't mean that the work is not there. It's just the way that I used to do work before, it doesn't exist anymore. So now I'm figuring out my group in Australia. How can I meet their needs? The kids that I work with in Africa that love me. Is there a way to get to Africa? So I started doing work in Australia. I started doing international work again, all right? But again, I had to go from being passive to being active. So you see these relationships that I have, now I've got to tap into these relationships. So I started doing work for, again, the NBA when they were in the bubble. I started working with guys individually because they had never been in a bubble. They had never been away from their families. They had never been in this political environment we're in. They didn't know how to present the African-American experience. Should I march? Should I protest? Should I keep quiet? Should I DM? Should I text? Should I speak vocally? Like, how should I go about doing it? And so from this pandemic, I realized, there's opportunities, right? But now you may have to do a different type of work. Still same person, still same energy. You can still draw from your experiences, your degrees, but you have to do it in a way that you had never done it before. So another opportunity, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with this gentleman, Meek Mills, but when Meek Mill came out of prison, he mentioned that he had been listening to my stuff. We connected during the Super Bowl in Houston. I get a phone call about 3 months later. He puts me on his album. Of course, there's a residual check, but it wasn't something I was paying attention to. Why? Because as I mentioned before, I was speaking keynote presentations, traveling the world. So the type of money that I was making, that was kind of light when you compare it to what I was making speaking, right? Everything changed though. So now I'm like, yo, Meek, man, he put me on his album. So perhaps this is a lane. This is an opportunity. So I end up doing work for a group called Disclosure years ago. Tap back into them. Did 3 projects on their last album. I did a commercial for Rams. Just did a commercial for the Mike Tyson Jones fight that's coming up, in a couple weeks. And so I began to say to myself, you got to start exploring. Like you got to start exploring in ways that you never had to explore before. You've got to kind of get out there, put yourself out there. You've got to let people know that don't typecast me. I'm not just the motivational speaker. I don't just provide inspiration. Now I provide a system. Now I have data. I have a data-driven tool that I use, which we took the DISC, the values and the attributes, and kind of revitalize those and reintroduce those to the world, to the marketplace in a way that maybe in the 1950s or the early 1980s, they weren't using the assessment the way we were using the assessment. So now I'm working with the Minnesota Timberwolves and Coach Saunders and his team, right? And we're using the assessment. What are their personalities? What are their values? What are their attributes? And I had to reinvent myself. So it didn't mean that there weren't opportunities available, but it meant the way that I used to do business before, I had to make some adjustments. Again, I had to push the refresh button. I had to reintroduce myself to the world. All right. So that's critical. Right. So again, I started doing voiceover work, got the equipment in my home, had to buy a studio in the home. Right. But I was able to find a way to say, hey, nope, can't Keynote anymore. Nope, can't do corporate anymore. Can't travel internationally anymore. Can't do the schools anymore. But there's still an opportunity for me. All right. So again, relationships that I had established early on, starting to tap into those relationships. OK, so we have to think about what are the relationships that we have that are meaningful relationships, right? That are productive relationships. We just haven't tapped into them. It was a season where perhaps we didn't need them in a way we need them now. And I started going through my Rolodex, right? And I started calling on people who I knew had influence. I started calling on people who I knew at one point that I had impacted. Why? So I could get back to income, all right? So again, those relationships that we have are important. As I mentioned, I went from being charismatic, I went from being enthusiastic and inspiring to more systems driven, right? And so now when I'm working with teams, I'm talking about the pilot, the flight attendant, the grounds crew, and the air traffic control. I'm breaking down how one group moves fast and another slow, much more methodical. How one group is people oriented and another is task oriented. So again, it's not my my primary gift in terms of getting on stage and doing what I do, but it is my secondary gift. I have degrees in education, right? I have a master's, a PhD. And a part of my 4-year degree was in education. So I didn't necessarily use that degree early on in my career because it wasn't necessary in terms of the work that I was doing. But now as a consultant, I'm pulling that work out. And so I'm showing individuals how to use an assessment to get the most out of their players, staff members, in their marriage, with their children, right? Taking it to the next level. All right. And so again, we go data driven, we go systems driven, we're way more analytical, right, than we've ever been before. All right. Let me see if I can get to this next slide. All right. So I just want to show you guys again, I'm using different skill sets, different strategies in order to get from where I was when the year started to where I am now in terms of hoping that again, we don't fold. And I got to be honest, the first 3 months, I needed that PPP. We needed that loan. It took us about maybe 2.5, 3 months to reinvent ourselves. So we started doing conferences like you guys are doing online. Again, I hadn't been on Zoom before. I wasn't really savvy with Zoom, right? But again, had to change my mindset and say, it doesn't mean that you can't do the work that you used to do, but you just have to do it differently. All right. So I'm gonna stop now. I don't know if we have any, because of the time frame, I wasn't able to get on earlier. So I'm gonna stop here. I don't know if we have any questions. Maybe you guys want to ask any questions. If not, I can continue to go, but any questions?
Yeah, one question that came in, just thinking about, your early life and I was reading or watching one of your videos the other day, and you talked about, getting knocked down 2 or 3 times. There was a class that you didn't pass, and then you didn't pass it again. Can you talk about that, man? Because I think it really speaks to I mean, some of the struggles that people may be having through the pandemic and trying to,
Absolutely.
hitting a brick wall and then
Yep.
trying to get
Absolutely.
over that.
Yeah. And that's why I started off by just being honest and say, I hit a brick wall. I went from one of the top motivational speakers in the world to not being on the road at all, to having this phenomenal community through one of my online platforms. At a time, we had almost 3,000 people, and we're traveling over the world, meeting them from city to city. It's like a tour we did every year, so I went from traveling I'm talking about 4 or 5 times a week. My wife and I probably were never home, to now sitting down and being in the house all day, every day. It's a total different dynamic, but one of the things that I challenge people to do is say, don't focus on the situation as much as you focus on whatever your mojo is, whatever your je ne sais quoi is. So what do I mean by that? So for me, sometimes when I focus on the situation, I get drained. But when I focus on my mojo, meaning what do you do well, E? What is it that sustains you? How do you eat? How do you attract people? How did you build these relationships? Well, it's through inspiration. It's through my videos. And so I had to say to myself, okay, E, you failed this class. You failed this class. But at the end of the day, it's not really about the class. Because you didn't go to school because you really wanted to be in school. You knew as an African-American male navigating in a majority Caucasian society that you're not going to get some of the same opportunities that other speakers have. Like, I know some of the other top motivational speakers in the world. They don't have a PhD and they don't need one. They don't have a master's degree and they don't need one. Some of them don't even have, some of the guys that I'm in business with, they don't even have a college degree. Some of them don't even have a high school diploma. But because they are Caucasian men and dominate the American experience, they don't have to do what I did. So for me, it wasn't about I failed. It was, E, you can't survive without being on that stage. You need a mic. You need to be around people. You are a people person. You provide energy, E. Like, this is what you do. So if you getting a degree is going to be a part of your success, I don't care how long it takes. It doesn't matter. You have to stay focused on the fact that as a speaker in your 20s, yeah, you could go without a degree. But in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you can't be around here speaking and the only thing you have is a GED. So whatever it takes, however many times it takes you to take that class, do whatever you need to do. So I realized I'm not meeting with my professor enough. I wasn't meeting with other students enough. I wasn't a good student. There were some classes that I just, inherently wasn't good at. And that was writing. I've been a good speaker, but not a good writer. But then I started to realize, Eric, if you can improve in your writing, well, that's going to enhance your speaking. And so for me, guys, it was like, whatever it takes, do it. So I went and got help from the Learning Resource Center. I started studying with friends. I started meeting with and becoming friends with the professors that were failing me. Like, I built a relationship. I wanted them to know me and not just know me as a number. You got to think, man, you at Michigan State University, you're talking about 50,000 students and less than 5% are African-American males. You're in a classroom with 300 people. It could easily seem like you're just a number. They don't even know who you are. And so I had to really establish a relationship with the professors. I had to figure out who they were and what they liked and how they wanted me to write. But at the end of the day, I knew that quitting wasn't an option. I knew that failing, now, of course I failed, but meaning ending at failing, I was like, there is a way to skin this cat. There is a way to get around this. There is a way to give them what they want, and I'll do whatever it takes, because without a degree, it's going to limit how much money I make. It's going to limit how many opportunities I get. And let's just be honest. I'm not suggesting that people need a PhD by any means. But we understand that as African-American men, people will make excuses for why they don't hire you. I didn't want to give them any excuse for not hiring me. I wanted to be able to say, man, you hired my man. He don't even have a college degree, but you won't hire me. And I got a PhD. So I wanted to put myself in a position where I got rid of every excuse that one could possibly have for not giving me an opportunity. So in short, I just knew that just because you fail, it doesn't make you a failure. You have to keep trying. You have to keep strategizing. You have to keep looking at different angles, and you have to find a way to get over this hump.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Definitely. Thank you for that. Another question, relationships that you've developed, have they been mostly naturally developed, E? or developed out of, driving the business forward? Obviously you're a brand and you're driving that brand forward, but the relationships that are deep, I read about your relationship with Chris Paul, those deep relationships, how do you think they're cultivated? Is it more from a business side or just naturally
Man,
organically?
hey, boss, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Nobody's ever asked me that question. So let me say this to you. I believe, and for those of you who are married, you have children, you have even siblings, you know that part of a relationship is natural, but the meaningful, deep parts of that, they have to be fostered. Okay, they have to be cultivated. So let me give you some what I would consider to be tips. So I remember, again, Cam Newton is a great friend. When I first met Cam, it was, of course, in the context of the NFL. After our relationship kind of grew, Cam started inviting me to, their celebrity events, kickball, whatever you want to call these events. So I'll give you one example. So at an event, I noticed that he had a little brother. His little brother was in high school at the time, eventually went to Howard University, and now he's playing football for Auburn, right? Go figure. I remember being at these events. Cam had all these celebrities. And I remember everybody flocking to the celebrities, but nobody flocked to what you might consider to be like just his little brother or his father or his mother. And so I saw a gap. I saw the gap was here he has a teenage brother who's trying to follow in his footsteps. I'm imagining it could be difficult. And so instead of spending time with him, Michael Strahan was there. It's people like this. I decided two things. One, I was going to spend and build a relationship with his brother. Two, while everybody was clamoring for the celebrities, I was literally picking up plates, putting garbage in a garbage can, putting seats back. I was just helping people, talking to his mom, talking to his dad. One of the young ladies that was what you would consider to be as a personal assistant, and she was doing the VIP tickets. People were bum rushing her, trying to get through. And I was like, I got your back. And I stood there and was like a bodyguard with her. And me and her were just talking for the 2 or 3 hours. So what I'm saying is that, yes, my speaking attracted me to these individuals, but me seeing gaps and saying, yo, Cam, what can I do for you? Oh, you got a little brother. And so I promise you, at least for about 2 or 3 years when he was in college, I would call him weekly and we'd have worship. We'd pray together. He talked to me about things that, were challenges. I was an academic advisor and taught courses at Michigan State. So I knew all about the college life and was able to assist them. And before you know it, I called Cam once like, yo, Cam, I need you to speak at an event. He's like, no question. We fam. What do you mean by that? I know that you are staying in touch with my brother and looking after my brother. Same thing with CP3. As he would make his different transitions, I would be there for him, just putting videos out, sending personal emails, sending personal videos, sending personal voice messages, and didn't ask for anything, didn't want anything. And as a result of that, CP3 was like, yo, 90% of the people that are in my life are in it for what they can get. You are not only in it for what you can give, you've proven yourself over the last 2 or 3 years to be consistent. So again, I would have to say that I do have a natural gift because of my speaking of attracting people, but those relationships are fostered because I see a need and I feel a need.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great lesson on developing deep relationships beyond just the contractual piece, right?
Absolutely.
And that was from our BAM Boston folks. So thank you, brothers, for that question. My people at Amazon Web Service want to know, and thank you, Amazon, for your support here. What are you next focused on, E? The pandemic is what it is. We are where we are at the moment. There's good things we hope on the horizon where the vaccine is concerned. But in your mind, what's 2 or 3 things that you have kind of in the front of your view that's next?
Yeah. So I'd say this pandemic has naturally, they say cream rises to the top. And I'm not suggesting that I'm cream, but I am suggesting that we all have natural gifts. And so one of the things that COVID has done is that it has stripped us of the stability and the predictability we once had as a nation. So one of the things that I think that I can do for the people who follow me is add a sense of direction, just on a daily basis, helping people to make better decisions. We're at a point where the country is, it doesn't matter what side you're on, we are more divided than we've ever been before. I don't ever remember coming up as a kid hearing red and blue. You know, I just heard the red, white, and blue. So now we're hearing this talks of, are you red, are you blue? And so there's a lot of division. And so one of the things that I think I'm cast to do is help merge people together. One of the unique gifts that I have is that my ministry is not black, it's not white, it's not Asian, it's not Hispanic, it's not gender specific, it's not age specific. I am, when I tell you one of the joys of doing what I do is fathers and sons and grandsons all listen to my stuff. You know, there's some hip hop that fathers won't listen to, you know what I'm saying? But my stuff, the whole family is listening to it together. Mother, son, daughter, husband, church members, schools, prisons, you know. And so for me, it's, Eric, you have to do your part to diffuse the anger that exists, right? You gotta do your part. And then the final one is a system. So I am helping school districts, teachers, students through our assessment to understand each other better, to understand how to communicate with each other better, to understand how to create environments that naturally lend toward our character. We all know human psychology is deep. We know that it's real. It's data-driven, it's scientific, but oftentimes it's not used in our society for whatever reason. So I'm teaching people how to understand other people's language and how to understand their viewpoint and why they view things the way they're viewing them. And so that's the last one, whether it be schools, the NBA, the NFL, corporate America, really helping people do 4 things: help people make better decisions, helping people to understand what are the healthy relationships that I need to be in. What are the relationships that are going to fuel me? Even though we hunker down right now, we can't necessarily, you know, mingle the way we needed to mingle, the way we used to do it before. How do I pick my fave 5 so that they energize me in this time of lack and they keep me focused? Accountability. Number 3, through our assessment, creating stability. How do I create a success routine? We're helping people with that. Like literally, what time should you be getting up? What time should you go to bed? You know, what are the activities that you should be doing that are going to help you? And then finally, I said it, systems. And for those of you, what does that mean, E? It's the Phil Jacksons of the world. We're trying to help the Michael Jordans who are, Mike, let's be honest, probably was one of the greatest athletes in basketball, but he didn't always win a championship. It wasn't until he got the triangle offense, until he learned how to play defense, until he learned how to trust his other teammates. Phil did that. Phil did that for him. Phil did that for Kobe. So what we're trying to do is help those personalities that are kind of spontaneous in nature, kind of fast-paced, impulsive. We're trying to give them a system and say, hey, this system is not meant to stifle your talent, but in actuality, it's like a general contractor and an engineer. We want to be the engineers in your life. We want to help you put a blueprint together before you just start going and tearing stuff down and trying to build. And so those are the 4 things that in this pandemic I'm trying to do to help those who, as I mentioned before, follow me and are part of our organization.
Yeah, a lot of focus and hard work has gone into bringing you to where you are, E. But talk about those allies in particular, that poured into you to help you get to where you are.
Yeah, that's so important. So I have a gentleman, Anthony Flynn, who calls himself the CEO of CEOs.
He's moderating one of our panels.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay. So I have leaned heavily, on Anthony Flynn. And guys, this is why this is so important. I speak with all humility. I do not take any credit. But Anthony Flynn went through our program, and we always say we eat our own cooking. And how ironic is it that a young man that went through our program is adding so much value? I like to believe he's adding more value to me and my organization and my church and my son than I've ever added. So sometimes our allies come from those we help, and I mean this, guys. Sometimes we think about, man, E.T. Warren Buffett, E.T. Dan Gilbert. And the reality is I can pick up the phone, and I have. I have picked up the phone in that group with Quicken Loans. I had a situation where a home that I live in right now in Southern California, they told me that, after looking at homes, they told me we don't have a home in this community for you. Unfortunately, we sold out. I'm like, that's not possible. So I did. I had to pick up the phone and call somebody from Quicken Loans. They made a phone call and was like, come on, that's not possible. The week I was supposed to close, the bank told me that they're reneging because of COVID-19. I'm like, it's not possible. I got money in the bank. I could pay for the house. And I had to make a phone call to a very high-ranking CEO that I know. They made a phone call 48 hours later. I got the call. We're sorry. We are going to give you the loan. So I'm not suggesting that I don't use, some of my get out of jail free cards. But when I tell you, I think what we do wrong sometimes is we look at some of the bigger names and go, man, I need to call CP3. No, sometimes the allies that you're looking for are people within your own sphere of influence, your own Fab Five, the people that we talk to every day. And I say that because we overlook those people that we're closest to, because it's like, he was born in Bethlehem. You know what I'm saying? That's Mary, Joseph. It can't be that deep. You know what I'm saying? And they are that deep. The people that are closest to you and that you can literally pick up the phone at any time of the day and call, sometimes those are your greatest allies. So again, yes, I have had to call on some people that I know that are, the one percenters in this world. But I also call on my one percenters, the people who are closest to me, the CJs, the Anthony Flynn's, Jamal King, who was another person that went through my program that has now got me in the real estate game and allowed me to make a lot of money during this pandemic. Why? Because we can afford properties that we couldn't have afforded maybe 5 years ago. They're at a different rate. And I'm doing what I heard Warren Buffett do. I'm doing that very thing now. We own a solar company. I have equity in the solar company. And so I'm relying on a lot of people that went through my programs. They're the people that are helping me at this particular time. Another great question.
Final question, E, and just for everyone that's attending, after this session, we're going to get right into our CEO panel session at 3:00. But E, obviously the confidence comes through, right? But we all have this imposter syndrome piece that we battle with, right? So just talk about just navigating that piece and how you get up and get over that every day, and push through.
Foster, where you get these questions from, bro?
Listen,
you coming with
it. It's coming through the chat. These are my questions, man. They're coming through the chat.
And again, I say that, man, because sometimes I go to places, they say, what time you get up, E? I'm like, bro, you could go read that somewhere in one of my books, or I'm sure that's on a video. Like, ask me something substantive. Look, man, when I tell you that the confidence that I have now, I didn't have it 4 years ago. And I'm going to tell you why I didn't have it, because I had the wrong perspective, right? So when I first started doing corporate work, I was thinking to myself, man, I can't be in the room with these white males, just being real. Like, we don't have nothing in common. I come from Detroit. My mom wasn't in my, my dad wasn't in my life. My mom was a teenage mom. I didn't finish school. I just had, but I was still speaking and getting on stage, but I wasn't as good as I am now, not because I didn't have the ability to be, but I was doing two things. I was speaking and worried about what the people in the audience thought or didn't think about me, And I don't know if you guys saw that picture with Warren Buffett, but if you notice, I kept it 100. I had my baseball cap, my T-shirt, my J's, but by that time I had gotten to a place in my life where I was like, yo, E, you don't need to be like everybody else. They're not bringing you in because you're like them. That's the exact reason why they're bringing you in. You challenge these dudes in a way that they won't challenge or probably can't because of your integrity. So I started realizing that I have an advantage. I'm asking you, you're a seven-figure earner, but are you a seven-figure dad? Are you a seven-figure spouse? Yeah, I know you know how to make money, but are you one-dimensional or are you triple-double? And nobody wants to be one-dimensional. And so I started realizing, like, yo, E, everything you've been through, homelessness has prepared you for this stage. Taking 12 years to get a 4-year degree prepared you for this stage. Not just the PhD, the GED prepared you to be on this stage because you know how to finish. You know how to complete something. Like, it's authentic, it's real. These aren't hand-me-downs. You've lived through these principles. And so I think the toughest thing for me was comparing, and not comparing myself, meaning to Tony Robbins, to Zig Ziglar, to Les Brown, but as a human, asking myself, did I deserve to be in this room? I don't have the money they have. At that time, I didn't know nothing about net worth. I didn't have the portfolio they had. You know, I didn't know the people they knew. And I realized after some soul searching, that's why you were here, because they have all of that stuff, but a lot of it is superficial and they don't have the real meaning of life. And I brought you in this room to give them that. CEOs like, yo, that's what I brought you here for. Challenge them. Like, so what if they don't clap? Or so what if they don't, give you, they don't affirm you? So what? And I remember, man, just letting everything go and just like, scared money don't win. You know, if you're gonna get on this stage, give 120% you. Mm-hmm. And man, I remember no claps, people staring at me, looking at me funny. And then boom, I get in the hallway and a dude will pull me to the side and be like, yo, I don't want nobody to know this, but my daughter can't stand my guts. And I'm a workaholic and I needed to hear that message today. Or, man, I'm a believer and I've kind of shied away from walking in my belief. Man, thank you. So maybe publicly people wouldn't say thank you, but privately people would pull me to the side and say, man, no, I've never heard a presentation like that before. Nobody's ever made me think and shift my paradigm like you did. Nobody's ever reached my heartstrings like that. Nobody's ever had my hair, giving me goosebumps. Like that's never happened. Normally they're going through the normal presentation. So yeah, I had it, and I promise y'all it wasn't that long ago, but I had to think about what made me special, what makes me unique. And yes, I'm rare. We're all rare, and it's our rarity that makes us special, not what we have in common with everybody that makes us special.
Yeah, man, I so appreciate you. I mentioned in our earlier session that, my son turned me on to you, man. And you provide a lot of inspiration for a lot of people, great blueprints on how to, push through and keep moving and really work to win. So I really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry for the early.
Yeah, I'm sorry about it as well. I could have probably done a better job. I apologize.
Listen, like I said, and I mentioned this for everyone on the line, we will be back live at some point in the future. Yeah. And they will see you on stage and looking forward to that piece. So
yeah, well, you see me, you'll see me at dinner or lunch and after stage. We'll hug and talk. That's the part I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, appreciate you. And
Thank you.
Everyone on the line, we're going to transition to the next session, Black and Latino CEO panel discussion. Hopefully you can stay on for that, man, if you can. And we'll be on 3 o'clock sharp. So you have 3 minutes to get a drink and come back with us.
And we'll stay in this room.
You can stay wherever you want, E.
Okay.
Okay.
All
right. Just turn your camera off.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. Okay, I see our panelists coming in. Rob, not sure if you're in as of yet, Rob Perez.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. All yours.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. And first of all, let me just say thank you to Emerson, to Paul, and all the organizers. This is an absolutely phenomenal event, and it's an honor to be here. And very much an honor to be able to moderate this panel of extraordinary individuals. So I'm just going to start off with a quick introduction, then I'll let everybody introduce themselves. My name is Rob Perez. I am currently an operating partner at General Atlantic, which is a global growth equity firm. Prior to that, I was CEO of Cubist Pharmaceuticals, which was a mid-sized biopharmaceutical company which was acquired by Merck. And I have a side gig of founding and chairing a nonprofit organization called Life Science Cares, which aims to unite the life science community in the fight against poverty in 4 different major biopharma hubs in the United States. So that's me, and maybe we could throw it to Corey next as the next person to introduce themselves. Corey, you're on mute.
You think I'll be used to this by now. So I want to also start by echoing my thanks to the organizers. I think this is so wonderful to get together. I cannot wait to actually see you all in person sometime soon. But my name is Corey Thomas. I am the chairman and CEO of Rapid7, a technology and cybersecurity firm based in Boston, Massachusetts. I've spent most of my career in technology, and I have started to slowly broaden myself around investing in both other tech companies, and I'm on a number of boards, including Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts and LPL Financial.
Terrific. Nathaniel?
Well, hello again. My name is Nathaniel Smith, and I have the honor of serving as the founder and chief equity officer of the Partnership for Southern Equity. It is indeed an honor to be a part of this panel. The Partnership for Southern Equity works to advance a racial equity agenda in the American South by focusing on issues associated with climate, economic inclusion, equitable growth, and health equity. Working really hard to just elevate an equity agenda. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. My background is pretty much this work. Started out as a affordable housing advocate, and then began to work at a university to engage universities around issues around engaged scholarship. And then I left to found the Partnership for Southern Equity.
Terrific. Thanks, Nathaniel. Chris, how about you go next?
I'm going to break with the previous comments and not thank Paul and Em for what they're doing today. I'm going to thank the wonderful communities that birthed them, because obviously they come from good folk, good village, because they're such outstanding Black men and they mean so much to so many people, me in particular. So I'm Chris Howard, Dr. Chris Howard, to get fancy about it. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I was blessed to have been on a Rhodes Scholarship years ago. I am the 8th president of Robert Morris University, a national doctoral granting university just outside of Pittsburgh of about 5,000. Yes, my basketball team made it to the dance last year before COVID hit. I want to go on record as saying that. I had a career in the Air Force as a chopper pilot and intelligence officer, in the reserve as a human intelligence officer, 21 years between active and reserve time in corporate at General Electric, time at Bristol Myers Squibb, and ultimately into higher education as a vice president for strategy at Oklahoma, and then the president of Hamden Sydney College south of Richmond for almost 7 years, and I've been the president of Robert Morris for almost 5. And then on the side, my wife and I, we started a foundation called Impact on Lives to bring South African college students of color to visit the States. We've been doing that for about 20 years. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Andre?
Thanks, Rob. I think, first of all, I would like to say thank you to Chris and to all of our veterans. We had Veterans Day yesterday, and it is really truly an honor to share the stage with somebody that had such a distinguished career protecting our freedom. So thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. And thank you for your current service, which is equally laudable. I happen to have served in presidential guards in Mexico, which I don't think it counts in our Veterans Day, but nevertheless, I thought I threw that in there. The president didn't die during my service, so I think I kind of contributed to my job. I am CEO of a company called Greenlight here in Boston. It's a startup focused on two issues that I think are pretty current. One of them is trying to get sustainable food to every person on the planet. The other one is trying to get us over the COVID crisis. So two little things that occupy my time on a daily basis. Like Rob, I'm part of the biotech community here in Boston, but most importantly, I have the honor of serving as CEO, which means that I get to try to encourage young people, especially young people of color, to follow careers in science. I've been teaching at MIT for the last 20 years, really trying to tell all of our brothers and sisters that there's really no barrier for people of color to make a difference in our scientific community. So thank you for having me. It's a true honor.
Awesome. Thank you, Andre. And then finally, JC.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here. My name is JC Morales. I'm the founder and CEO of a firm called Surfside Capital Advisors, raised in Puerto Rico and got my street cred in Wall Street for a decade or so. And about 5 years ago, founded this firm, which is really a boutique investment banking firm with growth and turnaround expertise. Our portfolio, interestingly enough, includes about half of our names are Black and brown companies. And I take a lot of pride in being able to help our folks advance economically. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. So as I'm sure everyone will see, we have an extraordinary group of men here to be able to provide some insight. So my job is to try to ask some questions and get out of the way. So I'm going to start with asking the panel, given that we have probably a number of brothers in the audience who are either earlier in their career or mid-career. And I want to ask you if you could go back and find the early career or mid-career you, knowing what you know now, what would you say to that young man that you think would have been helpful to him to get where you are today? What advice would you give yourself and in that way to the members of the audience who are listening that want to get where you all are?
I'll jump in first. I'll be the canary in the coal mine there, Rob. No problem. Well, you have Muhammad Ali behind your shoulder. I'd say, rumble, young man, rumble. I would say two things. I'll break it up very quickly. Two things. There's an arc of your career, and quite often in the beginning, it's what you know, then it's who you know, and then it's who knows you. And that transition is something you have to be aware of. So getting those, I love how my friend said, JC said, I got some street cred in Wall Street. You know, it's good to get those bona fides early on to line those things up, but ultimately the relationships you develop, the people you know and how they know you becomes as important as the technical skill set. Sometimes we get so hung up on, I can do it and I can do it well, but the question becomes, well, who can you do it with? So that arc and that trajectory is very, very important. Number two, I would say, it is just as important to it is just as important to manage those intangibles as it is to manage the tangibles, right? You know, sometimes we get into a culture. I mean, I was at General Electric, and one of my bosses, who was a mentor of mine, brother, he asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm doing great, and I rattled off all these technical numbers I was hitting. He's like, nope, you're not doing well. You don't understand our culture, and you're not learning the culture properly, and you're not going to do well here. And I ended up doing fine because I listened to him. Finally, I would say this, and I kind of go back to the last speaker, accept some failure. You know, it is not going to be smooth. There's going to be ups, there's going to be down, but turn experience into insight, reflect, and learn when you go through those experiences.
If I could add to that, you know, someone in the chat room mentioned executive mentorship. That's really important. If you don't have a mentor, you should seek one proactively, right? Seeking those words of advice and having that place of safety in which you can have career discussions, really important, right? The two things that comes to me, you know, if I were 20 years younger today, right, is the importance of patience, right? Sometimes, particularly when you deal with high achievement people, you know, they tend to go into really impatient mode, and that could work very well in certain circumstances. But in many ways, the higher up you go and the more complex the challenges you're faced with, Rome wasn't built in a day, and you do have to take a little bit of a patient approach to solving problems, using data and emotional intelligence to tackle the challenge at hand, right? So, which brings me to my second point, right? The what is the how is as important as the what, right? Getting great things accomplished, but doing so in a way that you're being respectful of others and are communicating appropriately are things that are going to balance your career, right? It's not just being, execution focused and doing everything right. It's how you're getting about doing things, right? So that's what I would say, and I'll pass it on with all my colleagues.
I'm happy to jump in. Mine is a piece of advice that I got, but it was actually a little bit later than it could have been helpful for, and I probably stalled a little bit. And so I'll just give you the advice in the context. So, I was going up for a mid-level, relatively big promotion, and I didn't get it. And I didn't actually feel that it was actually fair at the time. And luckily, I had a friend who was several levels higher, and she was actually in the room when it was actually being discussed. And she was willing to actually debrief me afterwards. And there was two important things. One, on the whole mentorship thing, she was a mentor. And so she was able to say this, listen, I don't think this is fair. So there was some validation there, which is actually completely valid. And she also was willing to commit, say, listen, and we're going to work to fix this situation, which actually was good. But then she asked a pivotal question that I wished I had gotten earlier. She was just like, the reason it was unfair is that you got knocked for sort of like the aggressiveness and the approach and some of the other stuff. And some of the people that got promoted had the same dynamics. That was actually there. But the question she asked me, she's just like, we're going to get you there and we're going to fix it. And it was unfair. But she's just like, you all were jerks. She's like, you talk over people, you actually exhibit bad behavior. And her point was, just because it was unfair, it doesn't mean there's not something to learn from it. And the lesson that I learned was, that I wish I had earlier, is that I can't let the people around me set the standard of what's excellent. And always actually go out, talk to people. This whole thing about sort of like being connected, but what you're trying to get to is sort of a bar of what excellent actually is. And don't have a small definition of excellent. Go out and actually be hungry and actually try to figure out what excellent is in a broader world context. And that started me on that path. And she really pushed me to sort of like say, don't set the standard and judge yourself by these other sort of like folks in here. Like, be the best in the world, and we're going to actually go fix some of the stuff that was unfair. And so that standard of excellence being a broad one, not a narrow one, and not define it just by who I'm around, was sort of like something I would go back and tell myself earlier.
But if I can jump in, 20 years ago, I probably would have told myself, take care of your hair, because then it all just goes away too quickly. Right, Chris? But shortly after that, 20 years is a long time, and all of us have been at this for 20 years, and it's a long time to be chasing the next one, right? So one thing that I learned pretty early on is there's going to be some really bad moments. There's also going to be sweet moments, and you got to thoroughly enjoy those sweet moments, right? I remember I was in the middle of one of the biggest financings we did as my first child was born, and had I just been all business and hadn't taken the time to be a dad to a newborn, what would have been the meaning of that big financing, right? So yes, it's all about, especially for us guys of color, trying to prove ourselves in a society that has stacked against us. But if you don't stop and be a dad and be a husband and be a mentor to somebody else, then the triumphs are really meaningless. And then the second one that I learned actually by watching my oldest son get knocked out on the football field more times than I care to watch is, you're going to get knocked down so many freaking times, right? And again, Muhammad Ali also said it. There's really no shame to getting knocked down. It's going to happen. And Scori was just describing, it happens. You just got to get up, right? The leader, the winner, the mentor is not somebody who's specially smart or talented or whatever. We're actually just too stupid to realize that we're down on the canvas again, and we should probably stay down. We just keep getting up. So the reality is, what makes you special is that internal fire to drives you to get up again and put your hands on it.
Mm-hmm. So a few quick things, and I'll be as quick as I can. Number one, start as early as you can taking care of yourself. Self-care is critical. You know, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And if you want to win, you have to take care of yourself. It means nothing if you've done all of these things and they're reciting all of your accomplishments at a funeral. Stick around, do the best you can to stick around for as long as you can to make the impact you can. Second, even in the most difficult and unfortunate times, there are always lessons to learn. And regardless of what you are involved in or deal with in those times of disappointment, look for the lesson. There's always a lesson there. Even when you're frustrated, take the time to look for the lesson. 3, it's important, and for me personally, I wish I would have understood the power of developing and cultivating relationships. A lot of times when we're younger, we don't understand that relational capital is just as important to the success trajectory of someone than financial capital. And so focus on that relational capital and understand and learn how to cultivate relationships and maintain relationships. And these last 2 things that I wish I would have understood is that it is just as powerful to have the ability to ask the right questions than to have the right answer. Learn how to ask the right questions and also learn to listen, to understand and not just to respond. You know, those are key things that have helped, that I've developed, and I wish I understood those lessons 20 years ago.
Wow. Thank you all, gentlemen, for those brilliant insights. You know, one of the things we talked about during the pre-panel call was, you know, for a lot of young people, I know I was afflicted by this to a great degree when I was young. I was just into achieving. I wanted to get the next thing, and as soon as I got it, I was going after the next thing. But often we don't take the time to figure out whether we're actually even in the right place. And Andre, I think you spoke a little bit about this before. How do you help people to figure out, or to what advice can you give them to tell them to have them figure out whether they're in the right place? Should they continue to chase the carrot where they are, or should they be moving on to maybe somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, look, the climb is hard, right? And the climb is going to be trying, and it's going to be testing you every step of the way. And so the key thing is your heart in it? Are you deeply passionate about the causes that you're pursuing? Because no matter what you do, if you don't feel incredibly passionately about it, if you don't love what you do every day that you do it, then sooner or later you will get tired. There's plenty of roads to the top of the mountain, but the climb is hard. And there's many more roads going down the mountain. So if your heart isn't in it, if you don't enjoy every moment of the challenge and the climb, because the passion inside you drives you to keep on going, then you give up. Sooner or later, you give up. So question yourself, right? I couldn't agree with Nathaniel more, right? You need to know how to ask the right question, even from yourself. Why am I doing this? Do I really want that promotion? How is my life going to change if I get that promotion, right? Am I willing to take the risk? Is this the right time for me to take the risk? Mentors help you figure that out because they've gone through it, but ultimately, you got to find the answer inside of you, right? Only you can tell you whether you're going to be happy doing something or not.
Can I add something to that, Rob? You know, someone told me many years ago, find your inner self, right? And the inner self is that when no one's around you, you know, when you're laying down in bed or having a moment of peace, right? You can make a pretty quick determination if you are in a mental peace of mind, right? Generally speaking, that's the biggest telltale if you're in the wrong spot or the right spot, right? If you're in the wrong spot, you will not be feeling good about it, right? And that's a sign that you need to act, right? Act could be seek a mentor. Act could be start a new career, a new trade, retrain yourself, go to church, whatever it is, right? But find your inner self and you will find the way forward, in my view.
You know, depending on how old you are, I know there's a spread in terms of folks on the call, some folks are trying to figure out, I love what Andre said about the passion. You know, passion, if it goes to the Bible, passion is something you're willing to sacrifice for. The passion of Christ. So what are you willing to go to the mat for? What are you willing to bleed for? Sometimes people just don't know. And so there's nothing wrong. There's some great tools out there like strength finders, what have you, some diagnostics out there. Don't sleep on those, because sometimes you're just not 100% clear if you want to have a software company or a life sciences company, you know, or that pathway. So I think use those tools to determine early on in your career, especially those of y'all that are college age or a little bit, you know, or a little bit older, to figure out what your true north is. The other thing I was going to mention a little later in your career, this is what I use, is I go through and I've moved around a lot of different parts in civil society, but my mantra is I want to lead, I want to serve, and I want to grow. It is a tripod. And if I'm not leading, serving, or growing, then it's time for me to pack my bag and do something different. And it happens kind of insidious over time. But to JC's point, I'll have a piece on it. I'll be on my treadmill, and all of a sudden I'll be like, you know what? I'm not quite, it's time to start thinking about what the next move is. And actually, we're all of a certain age where that happens and somebody usually calls us and we say that makes sense, as opposed to us calling them. That's, again, for us older folks on the call. But my mantra, lead, serve, grow. I encourage you to develop your own over time.
Fantastic. Other thoughts? Cool.
Maybe just an add-on to that, just very quickly, the importance of public service, right? The serve part, right? Whether it's, you know, sometimes one of the biggest growth experiences you've had in your life had nothing to do with what you did for yourself and a lot to do with what you did for others, right? So earlier on in my volunteer, get involved, right? You know, today, for example, I serve as co-chair of the Latino Legacy Fund in Boston, and I also serve for free on the board director of the Massachusetts Economic Development Bank, right? But those things are, you know, they're coming out of the desire to serve, right? So I think that desire to serve has a lot of payback, and people often overlook that.
The only thing that I would add is that, you know, excellence requires sacrifice. And I think on many occasions, people focus so much on this question of what you're willing to give to be excellent. I would reframe it and ask, what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to give up to be excellent? It may be going out and hanging out at all hours of the night when you're younger. It may be a certain decision that would have allowed you to take the easy way out. It may be giving up, you know, a certain position or a certain relationship that may minimize your ability to be successful. Or it may be you stepping away from being a part of the in crowd. You know, the question is, what are you willing to give up? And if you're willing to give up something, or even more than one thing sometimes to be excellent, then you're actually on that path towards where you want to go. But until you're able to answer that question, what are you willing to give up? It's going to be difficult for you to get to the level that you want to aspire to be.
Yeah, the only I would add is, I think appropriately, lots of the comments have been focused around sort of like the self, because I actually think that's key. It's sort of like, how do you actually think about yourself and how you develop yourself? I think when you do that, you will actually get a better sense of what are the types of cultures and what are the type of places and what are the type of people that you want to be around that will actually help you. We talked about mentorship, but it's also just the people that you're around, and are they moving in the direction that you actually are? And you also start to get a sense for organizations that are actually have the same views on whether it be excellence or development or other things. And as you get more opportunity, you get more and more both used to it, but you'll actually start to discern the differences between organizations and groups and teams and managers. And you'll get to a spot where it's not you actually just interviewing for a job. You'll actually also start interviewing other people to actually figure out, is this the place where I'm actually going to do my best work? And so I just think that there's the focus on the self, but you will hone, and you should be honing over time, your sense of what creates the great opportunity space and the right culture for you to actually really do your best work and to grow. And growth is challenging.
I want to switch courses a little bit and talk to you all as leaders. Clearly, this is a extraordinary time in our country, and there is a lot of let's just call it energy from companies who are expressing a desire to try to make a difference. You're all at the top of your game, and you're leading organizations, and you're unique because you're leaders of color. Let's talk a little bit about what you think the role of leaders of color within organizations should be to help to turn this energy into real action and ultimately change. So what I'd love to hear from you guys is kind of what are some of the things you're doing through your organization to try to get to sustainable change, as well as for brothers out there who are watching, what can you say to them to hopefully enable them to help their companies to get involved in sustainable change today?
Can I go first?
Sure.
First of all, this incredible period that our country is going through has, and hopefully this will change. But for now, I feel like it's kind of up to us, leaders of organizations. It doesn't seem like society is going to find their way on their own, and it doesn't seem like our government is ever going to get it right in the near term. So it kind of falls not only on this group that is on the panel, but everybody who's listening to drive that change that we want to see in the world. I kind of said, you know what, guys, we're going to make a different biotech company, right? Biotech companies have a mission that is in itself pretty unique, right? We got to cure a big freaking disease out there. That's the mission. That's being socially responsible. That's enough. Well, it's not, right? Let's make it clear. It's not. Any organization has the ability to be better. Any organization has the ability to create an environment where every person from every walk of life, of every color, of every gender can thrive. And so we made a mandate at Greenlight. As a startup company, it was easier because we were small enough and our investors kind of don't care as long as we don't spend all their money. We kind of said, listen, guys, we're going to hire 50% female at every level of the organization. And we're going to strive to find 50% people of color and 50% people that are white. And we're going to really work hard to try to get an equal number of people who have been in this country for more than one generation and people who have been in this country for less than one generation. And if we have to sue the federal government to get H-1B visas, so be it. We actually sued them twice and won both times. And in both cases, young women of color, one young woman from Nigeria and one young woman from India, who in our view had gotten their H-1B visas denied unfairly. We went to court and won. But it takes that, right? It takes somebody to make a difference. It is actually a choice, and we can choose to be passive about it and let our society dictate what type of organization we want to be. It is the same choice to say, I'm not going to stand for it. And the change that I want to see in our broader society and in this case, in Boston area, in our country, starts with our change. And so as a leader of color, as a first generation in the United States, I made the commitment that for as long as I'm CEO, this company will be truly diverse. We were, I think, the very first small biotech company in the Boston area to create a full committee on equality, diversity, and inclusion. And as you start seeing how that is now propagating, as it should be, because what's happening in our government is not fair. It's frankly not fair. And it is putting undue pressure on people who can't afford to have that undue pressure. So I encourage all of us to look into our organizations and drive the change very locally and allow that to then hopefully spread.
Well, I see three things happening right now on the policy front, and I can only speak to Massachusetts. The environment have caused the government here to gather a few Black and brown leaders over the last 2 months or so. And as a result of that, there's sweeping changes in diversity and inclusion policy issues at the governmental level here in Massachusetts. So I see that as a tangible result. The other thing that I'm seeing around the nation is this issue of changing governance is real. I think boards are now taking a lot more serious the whole issue of having a balanced approach to the slate of candidates that they consider for board seats, both on the women and Black and brown folks. And then largely at the corporate level, at least on the few corporations that I'm part of, asking the right questions around DEI accountability. How do we collectively getting involved? How do we define success? And that, what can we hold ourselves accountable to? It's a little, I see hope in the future. I think a little bit more traction being picked up around defining success the right way and putting some real measurable and tangible outcomes around it.
Please go ahead, brother.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to say I really appreciate the ending of your comments when you talked about indicators, because I think we're in a very critical time right now where this unique moment for the business community could easily move more towards marketing than meaning. And in many ways, you have a lot of companies that are benefiting greatly from a marketing standpoint and are really trying to conflate diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts when they're not the same. And for us, it's really, really important for us to continue to not just say we need more diversity, but where is that diversity within the organization? Are you just talking about low level or lower level leaders? Or are we talking about diversity in the C-suites? Are we also talking about procurement policies for that company? Are we also talking about contracting policies? So I think it's really important for us, again, to continue to ask the right questions and push. And, as a leader of an organization that has, for the past 10 years, fought for racial equity, in particular in the South, what we did, which I was really thankful to be able to do, was that we actually organized in Metro Atlanta 22 corporations, challenging them to move beyond corporate social responsibility towards what we're calling corporate racial equity, and begin to sit around the table of a group that we organized called the Just Business Roundtable, where we have many large employers now that are working with us to really think about ways that we can move again beyond corporate social responsibility and really move beyond marketing and more towards meeting. But if folks inside of these organizations aren't courageous enough to really speak out, and again, this question about what are you willing to lose or what are you willing to give up, we would not have an opportunity to move as far as we have. And I think now, if this is the time, I think that we have to really push the envelope. And but it's really, our destiny is in our hands.
I just want to continue this thread because, one, I have a great fear that the momentum that we have not just stalls but could regress. So that's been people that know me. This has been a fear since the start of this. And one, I want to say I actually think all of us can actually contribute no matter what levels that we're actually at. So I want to talk about this. I think if you think about sustaining change, it's uncomfortable. Like going to something that you don't understand and you don't do, you haven't done is going to be very uncomfortable. So I think about it both personally and organizationally and civically. It's sort of like it should be uncomfortable. And my job is to actually sort of like create a space that's slightly uncomfortable, but still makes progress. So I'm always trying to figure out like, how do we make progress, but how do we keep everyone uncomfortable? Because if people are comfortable, we're probably not making progress. And you can do that in any group around you. So like, at our company, we actually we didn't set quotas, but we actually said, listen, we should be at these things. We should actually have, when you look at women, when you look at people of color, we're well under. And we're going to measure it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to be candid. And we're going to ask ourselves, not sort of like, we're not going to manage to actually hit those, but we're actually going to say, why aren't we hitting those? And we're going to put it front and center. And that was uncomfortable. And trust me, there's a whole bunch of things on our Slack system that actually made a lot of people uncomfortable and some people irate. But we started that 3 or 4 years ago, and it's actually made progress today. And we're actually keeping that up. And we're actually continuing to press that. And, that's allowed us to go from, sub 5% people of color to just about 15% people of color. And it has to actually keep going up. But that discomfort is actually there, I think, is important. And so when we set our goals internally, we're always trying to say it should feel uncomfortable because aspiration should always feel uncomfortable. Likewise, when I think about sort of the spaces that I am, whether they're in boardrooms or business groups, is that it should always be a little bit uncomfortable. So those questions that everyone's talked about asking the questions and keeping it front and center, should say, we're going to make some progress. But again, is what does this actually mean? And, you know, I'll provide two examples that I'm currently focused on. You know, I think that we do not have an inclusive economy, especially in Massachusetts. So I look at places, I grew up in Atlanta, and I look at Massachusetts, I think about like, how do we actually build a more inclusive economy here? And one of the things that I'm trying to keep it uncomfortable is keep focused on about like, listen, where is the ladder? You know, we talk about social mobility, but like, how are we actually providing ladders? And my current focus right now is like we will actually count social mobility, and we will actually count how many people are actually moving out of poverty to the middle class. And my big focus is like, we have to count it. We have to be there. And if we're actually serious about it, we have to continue to focus on that. So my message to everyone, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be on a board, you don't have to be a CEO. In your peer groups and around you, like make sure that you're uncomfortable and everyone else is a little bit uncomfortable, because that's how you get progress. The last thing I'll actually say is that sometimes we have to be uncomfortable. So, you know, I'll give you an example, at least myself and some of my peers, not these distinguished, thoughtful gentlemen here today, are uncomfortable with sort of like some of the positions of the younger generations and how they're approaching problem solving. And I actually think that's a great tension. Because I think younger people coming into activism and taking an approach and challenging things and upsetting it actually should make us uncomfortable, because the system wasn't working. And so I just focus on like, change should be uncomfortable.
Awesome. Chris,
Rob,
I'll come to you and then we'll get
go to Q&A. Thank you. I really appreciate everything that's said. Corey, somebody told me, a mentor of mine years ago told me, former President George Washington, Jewish cat, Steve Trachtenberg, said, everybody wants progress, but nobody wants change.
Yep.
Right? So that uncomfortableness you're talking about, that uneasiness is a very natural thing, but you got to get through that to get the progress. So a couple different things. So let me, this is a fun question, because we're the older folk, we're the gray beards, the bald heads, or whatever, and we are the CEOs, the presidents, et cetera. And I will tell the young people on this call, it is a great feeling to be empowered to do the right thing and simply just do it because it's the right thing. There's so many times when you're young and you're coming up and you're like, man, he should call that out. She should call that out. This should be the metric. And you're trying your best, but you're navigating your ear. We are at the point now, we just simply say, you know, and again, the question was, what are you doing in your organization? Well, in my organization, we're not perfect, but we talk about it. We just did 14 hours of anti-racism training. I couldn't have done that as the vice president.
Yeah.
But as the president, I'm like, we're doing, all 30 of us in leadership, everybody, and taking 2 board members, a couple of white board members, a couple of my schools, predominantly white school. I said, we're doing 14 hours. Yes, sir. We are doing 14 hours because I said so, and it's the right thing. And I'm the president, and I'm not a power drunk president, but I'm a president that has seen some film, and I know it's the right thing to do. So inside the company, like everybody said, we are trying to identify things that make sense for we as a people, we as a nation, and we as our company. There's nothing that Andre said, I'm not going after incompetent people that are, that are Black or women or whatever. I mean, that's understood. Everything we're talking about is moving. Corey, his idea about who he's trying to bring in, JC with the economy in Massachusetts. We're not trying to bring in incompetence. We want to do the right thing, but we're calling it out. I'll just say 2 last things here. So when it looks at graduation rates, African-Americans graduated about a rate of the average 6-year graduation rate for whites in America is between 60 and 64%. And more white people go from high school to college than Blacks do. For Black people, it's around 40-something%, right? We are doing well, and we're above the national average in my school, my university. I'm proud of that. But I showed a sheet where our Black people were lagging our white people. And I said, just yesterday in call, I said, if this were the other way around, white people would be in the streets. Mm. And I couldn't say that when I was a VP at University of Oklahoma, but I'm sure as hell going to say it right now. That's a blessing. And there's many things in terms of, we built a $55 million building. Usually about 3 to 5% minority women folks that are investing. We're about 12%, right, in that building, trying to put capital in Black and brown people's hands and into women's hands and businesses in their hands. The last thing, so that's running the organization, our respective organization. What you didn't ask, Rob, but I think maybe Corey alluded to, was on the board side. I think it's important to speak your truth. You have a megaphone now in a way that I've never seen in my 51 years, where white folk are listening to black folk in a way that I just haven't heard. They just quiet, listen, give you an extra minute. And I start off with 401 years ago, and I'm talking about Emmett Till, John Lewis, Rodney King. We've seen it before, we heard it before, and those white folks are like, that's a good point right there. And they're like, go ahead. I'm okay. Let me give you some more, you know. And I'm not trying. I'm a Southern Baptist, so I'm preaching a little bit. And the last thing I'm going to say is, so when, you know, speak your truth. Let me tell you my lived experience. Andre thanked me for being a military veteran. My Air Force Academy friends were like, well, how was it? We were all brothers and sisters back then. Wasn't it the same for you? I'm like, no. I love my experience at the Air Force Academy, but my experience was different than yours. Let me tell you some stories that you didn't know about. But now let me hear it. The last thing I was going to say is this: when the challenge that we run into, especially the ones in this particular panel, we've made it. And we're George Jefferson. We're on the freaking, you know, we're on the top floor, 50th Avenue, Park Avenue. Young people got to go Google who George Jefferson was and know who that was. But we've made it. And what people look at us, they'll say, "Oh, well, you've made it. Your people are okay." No, we're not. No, we're not. Black people, black, brown. Duke Ellington wrote a wonderful piece called Black, Brown, and Beige. And I got my Latino brothers on this, my Latinx brothers on this. Hey, we're a real spectrum of color and socioeconomic. Some of us are way up here and some of us are not so much. But white people have to understand the nuance. Just because the black guy next to you did okay doesn't mean that he doesn't have a unique set of challenges he had to go through that have to do with structural racism, but also that there's a lot other people. The average net, I'll stop here. The average net worth of a white family in America is $110,000 a year. $110,000 based primarily in the equity in their homes. The average net worth of a black family is about $8,000 to $10,000. I should drop my microphone like Jay-Z and walk off, because that says it. 10x different. What is 10 times? If you look at your companies here, if you had 10 times the capital of another company, think about what you could do. And that's what's been done unto us for centuries. So thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate the question.
Fantastic. And I'll just add one thing to your point, Corey, about being uncomfortable. One of the sayings that I use often when I speak on this is every system is perfectly designed to produce the results it's producing. So if you haven't figured out a way to change the system, you can want change all you want. It ain't going to change. You got to change the system, and that's about being uncomfortable. So very well said.
You know, Rob, it's very interesting, right? Because we're talking about how uncomfortable change is. We're not sharing. We're very bad at sharing our stories of success, right? And so we as leaders of color have a responsibility to make it easier, not only for other leaders of color, but to our white brothers and sisters, to make sure that they understand that we went through it and it worked.
Absolutely.
Our productivity in our labs is up. Our turnover rate since we implemented this equality and diversity efforts is down. We have 2% turnover rate at Greenlight. The average biotech company in Massachusetts has 20% turnover rate. That's not an error. That's for sure, right? We got to put all the stories in a place where people can access them. And just like when you change your system from, you know, Zoom to Microsoft Teams, and you tell your neighbor, look, they worked. It wasn't comfortable, but look at where we are now. Yep. We got to do that with everything that we do.
Absolutely. I know Emerson and Paul are gonna get on me because I'm late getting to the questions. So Paul, you have a bunch of questions. Let me throw it
Rob,
over.
listen, this panel's been doing such a terrific job, and I can listen to you all day. This pearls of wisdom have been amazing, but there are a number of questions that I'm going to try to synthesize and try to sort of pick out some themes to see if maybe a couple of you can answer. And as a continuation to this discussion, you know, you said it, that everyone wants progress, but no one wants change. And so one of the questions is, you know, especially in corporate settings for Black and Latinx employees, there seems to be this feeling that there might be a backlash, right? After all these efforts as said and done, and after all these, you know, great strategies are implemented and all these, you know, sort of things, there will be a backlash. And, you know, someone might say similar to what happened after the Obama administration, because there was a Black man in the White House. So give me your sort of 30 seconds view on what your thoughts are. Is there a backlash coming, you know, if these efforts are not sustainable? And anybody can start.
Look, I think we should be ready for it. I think we should expect it. I think that the strides that people who are suffering every day are making for change are very real. And the fact that they have a voice now is very uncomfortable for an entire portion of the population. That is a fact. Now, we, as the community of color, we have to be prepared for that. And we have to have the counter arguments ready to go, right? And so if we don't expect it, then we're going to be on the loss if it does come. If it doesn't come, then great. I am expecting it. And I think we have to make our organizations and ourselves resilient to that and have the answers ready to go.
I think that unfortunately, I think it'll depend. I think there's two big factors that I think will impact it. Is that one is I do think it's going to be a little bit tied to what's happening in the economy and sort of like how long you sustain, sort of like, is it a fast recovery or an extended recession and what happens there. That type of thing tends to actually exacerbate the types of things we want to see change. So I think that's a factor that actually exists there. That said, I think that you will see backlash in some areas and not in some other areas. I feel very strongly that some white leaders have actually made significant progress in their thinking about these things. And I think some of that's going to stick. And so I am optimistic that some of it's actually going to stick. What I'm slightly more pessimistic about is that not so much that there'll be punishment, and there may be some of that in certain places. You'll always have some level of that. Where I'm more concerned is that you'll have extraordinarily nominal change. And then what you'll get to is a place where like, okay, we got, like, to me, look, I think it will be great on one hand and disaster on the other. If we got sort of like board representation of Black people sort of improved, which it absolutely has to improve. And then people are like, all right, we're good. We're done. We fixed it. We see them. You can actually look at it. If it stops there, that's a freaking disaster. And that's more my fear, is that you're going to get some nominal change and then it stops. And then none of the underlying stuff sort of like changes. And that's where I am on sort of like what could happen.
Thank you, Corey. So, the other batch of questions has actually to do with how do you, many of you have served as mentors and sponsors, but there's a real need here in terms of some instruction as to how does one best go about finding a mentor or a sponsor, and what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would advise someone to think about and to do when doing so?
I'll jump in there first. First off, there are some formal mentorship programs for professionals that one should consider signing up for, and don't sleep on those. And they are widely widely available for minorities and for majority folks. Be aware of that. But the typical thing they're talking about is how do you get someone to kind of get in your corner and what have you. First off, don't come to it with what you're going to get out of it per se, just from the beginning. Think about what you can offer. Think about how you prepare, and not just gimme. Some people walk in, hey, you're my mentor. Now I want to be the senior vice president or whatever. It doesn't work that way. So keep your eyes and ears open. And I always say, it always starts with a good set of questions, right? And somebody mentioned this earlier. So I know I did an internship at the House Armed Service Committee years ago, and there was this really nice guy that I was talking to him in the hall at one point, he was very interesting. And I said, can I come by tomorrow with a couple of questions about your career or advice you might have for me or something along those lines? And I came in and and this is what rich people say all the time. You can waste my money, but don't waste my time. So I came in there, I was like my old military commander, be bright, be brief, and be gone. Came in there, super tight, couple of questions, paid attention to it, because people like to talk about themselves. That's one thing. People, even if they're shy, they'll tell you about their journey if you ask them the right way. And then be very mindful of what they're going through. Would you mind if I come back in a couple of weeks with a couple more questions? And then let it kind of ebb and flow from there. What I find people do, and too often, is, will you be my mentor? And they're trying to rush it so much that the person probably got 20 people asking the same question. But like I said, ask good questions, keep it tight, and initially ask for homework. And if you're my mentor, and I mentor a lot of people, do your homework, because I'm going to ask you to do this, this, and this. And if you don't do it, then we're going to have a problem. So start with those good questions. That goes a long way.
Paul, if I may, two pieces of advice, perhaps for the younger folks attending this webinar, right? Um, look, to get a relationship developed with a mentor or a sponsor, the first piece of advice I would tell you is get out there. You don't do that by watching Netflix at night or sitting in front of your computer, right? And I found that to be a lot of times that's the case with millennials, right? You got to get out there. You got to network. You got to participate in society, right? Very hard to do with COVID. I get it, but this is a longer term view, right? A way to get out there is by, again, volunteering, right? Get out in an act of service, right? And ask yourself, how do I stand out? How do I stand out, right? Because the reality is that sponsor out there is getting pinged by 1,000 people, right? So how do I stand out? Find what is your genius that you can say, look, this is why I think I should have a relationship with you. Not in those words, but you get my point.
Thank you, JC. So there's, our friend Shauna Ferguson has asked a couple of questions. So I'm going to give one of her questions a little bit of airtime here. And it says, talk a little bit about how you champion change, for example, right and wrong. What advice do you have for early and career professionals about how to tailor their approach to the environment that they're in? So how do you champion change, and how do you advise younger professionals how to approach the environment that they're in?
Yeah, I'll jump in just with a quick piece of.
Make sure you.
I'll jump in with a quick piece of perspective. And so one is that, I think one of the fears that actually people have is that, will I be punished for advocating something, just to sort of put it out there. And I do think that you could be punished at different levels, and you have to actually, there's a calculus there. But I do think people miss these small pieces of change. And so, the small pieces of change that you can actually do is, first you can actually set an example. And so, like, if you happen to be a manager, you can actually sort of like set an example of your team. And then you could do some of the stuff that Andre was talking about sort of like the performance of your team that happens to be more diverse and some of the other stuff. The second thing is there's ways that you could actually keep an issue front and center without actually it necessarily having to actually feel sort of like an attack or contentious. And while that sounds like it's sort of like you're not sort of like taking these big bold stands, my only point is that there's a wide gradation of things that you can do, and they matter. Because if lots of people are consistently actually pushing it a little bit, that does make a difference. And, Chris said it earlier, is that, we have on this panel the advantage of actually being able to do some very different things that we could not do if we were not running our organizations. But that does not mean that there's not lots of things that people can do at different stages. And the thing that I worry about is that, like, we don't have to be complacent. We can actually do the things that we do. And if we all do the things that we can do to actually move the needle, to make it a little bit uncomfortable, to actually drive progress, then that actually matters. And one of my professors would talk about never underestimate the value of small, consistent things. And consistency and continuing to actually push in small ways, have the conversation. It doesn't always have to be these big grand statements. In fact, there's some research that have shown like big grand gestures rarely sustain. And so what I would just think about is sort of like, think about the consistency of the efforts, setting the examples, pushing your own community, your friends, your coworkers. Like, if you change the mind of a coworker or two, that impacts the lives of the people that they engage with. So there's little consistent things that we can do that matter.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to direct this question actually to Nathaniel and to Andre, if you don't mind. And the question is really related to, how do you deal with failure, right? And how do you deal with self-doubt? And one question said, I have analysis paralysis and I'm doubting myself all the time. Can you speak to your experiences with failure and whether that has been a motivator for you, and how you dealt with it? And what do you do when you find yourself stuck and sort of, not able to make a decision because you're lacking that self-confidence? And for the two of you, it may not be a case, but can you share with us what that has been like? Natalia, Nathaniel, we'll start with you, and then Andrea, we'll go to you.
And I'll be brief. I mean, I think first you have to believe in your heart that you've been given an assignment. A job is one thing, an assignment is another. And when you believe that you've been given an assignment, regardless of what happens around you, you know that you've been assigned to do something, and that in the end, the universe will conspire on your behalf. Number two, sometimes it's good to fail forward. And that's the way that I look at it. I look at it as, are you failing or are you failing forward? And sometimes just because you fail doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't move you closer to your goals. And so failing forward is another attitude and a way of looking at it that's very important. And then three, as I said before, look for the lesson. You know, even when you do fail, there's a lesson. And looking for that lesson can make you even more prepared for success. And so those are the three recommendations I would add.
Great.
That is extremely wise, Nathaniel. I think that if you're not failing enough, then you're not trying hard enough. It's like if you're always making your airplane on time, then you're showing up to the airport too early, right? The easy win, right? The layup is not going to win you games. You gotta take those 3-pointers. And you're going to fail a lot of those. You're going to miss most of the ones that you take. And if you're not missing a lot of them, then you're not taking enough of them. I think you got to savor beyond learning. Yeah, learning is a critical part of failure, but savoring them, understanding how you fail, why you fail. What were the parts of that failure that you enjoyed, right? Not all failures are all failure, right? When you lose a football game by a point, right? And you score 24 on the best defense, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You got to savor every first down. You got to savor every stop on fourth down. You got to figure out what were the parts of that you're going to put forth. And then lastly, and I think most importantly for me, you got to find what is that engine that continues to drive you to get up from the canvas. There's got to be that fire that makes you get up again. And by the way, if that fire isn't there, then you are in the wrong place. There's a reason why you're not getting up. That's not a fight that you want to fight. And maybe then it's time for you to look in the mirror and say, probably is not the right path for me because I don't have the passion to continue getting up.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it over back to Rob to close us out. So thank you all for your wisdom.
Well, thank you, Paul, and most importantly, thank you to the panel. I know I learned a lot today, and I'm certainly hopeful that our audience did as well. So thank you all, and I will wish you all the best of luck with the rest of the conference. And I think I'm kicking it over to Emerson now.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. We have our veterans in the investment and money-making game coming up next, and they'll be on exactly at 4. So you have a couple minutes to get something to drink and circle back with us. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. It was excellent.
My pleasure.
Hi, Val. Your mic is off.
How you doing? We're going to start soon. I think Kirk in. Okay, we're just waiting for Kirk, and just sit tight.
Did you say that my mic was on?
The mic is on.
It is on now. Good.
Okay. Hi, Daryl.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Are you in Texas or California?
I am right here in Weston, where you were for my 50th.
Ah, I thought you had sold your home.
No, it's here, and my kids are all
living there. Oh, good.
We're all here. The COVID connection.
I see. I gotta tell you, it changed a lot of things, right?
It did.
But I see some light for next year.
I do too.
Yeah. So
I really do.
second half of next year should be a whole lot better.
I think so too. There are always thin lines and most not so pleasant dark clouds.
Kirk, are you in as of yet? Kirk Sykes?
He was there earlier.
Just sit tight. I'm sure he's coming.
Hi, Sydney.
Oh, I see.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to see all of you. It's great to see you, Miss Mosley.
Hi, it's been a really long time.
I know, it has.
It seems like it was just yesterday we had that fireside chat.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, that was 8 years ago.
Years ago, right?
Oh my God.
I know.
But it does seem like very recent.
Everyone, just want you to know we're live in the room. And again, we're just waiting for Kirk. Sydney, I don't know where he is at the moment. I just sent him a note, but I'm sure he's on his way in.
He's on. He must be on a phone call or something.
Yeah, everyone just sit tight, and our moderator will be in a second.
Hello.
Hey, Kirk, you're good. You're live. So
Okay.
you got it.
Sorry. Okay, great. Let me see. Can we see all our panelists here, or are we able to? Are they being reflected in your screen only?
They are. You'll see them. There you go. It should be.
Okay, great.
Hi, Kurt.
Hey, how you doing, Daryl? Nice
Great.
to see you. All right, great. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Good to see all my friends, Val, Daryl, and my daughter, Sydney. And we've got a whole tribe here, so fantastic. So we've got an amazing panel planned for all of you. And we've got some amazing experts from very disparate perspectives. And we hope we can be able to give you some perspective here. So what I'd like to do is start off with each of our panelists introducing themselves. And we'll start with Val, and then Sydney and Daryl. We'll keep going. So Val.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Valerie Mosley. Professionally, I've been an investor most of my life. I spent the majority of my career at a large global investment management firm called Wellington Management Company, where I managed a lot of money, billions of dollars. I was a partner there. I retired a while ago and have been focusing on adding value not only to portfolios, but I wanted to add value to lives. So most recently, I started a firm called Right Up, which is focused, it's a tech company focused on closing wealth gaps and worth gaps for communities that have not been paid attention to in the past.
Great. Thank you. Sydney?
Great. Nice to see you again, Val. Thank you, Dad, for introducing me. My name is Sydney. I'm one of the co-founders of a nonprofit called Black VC, which is focused on empowering and supporting Black venture capital investors. And I'm also an angel investor and a scout investor on behalf of Lightspeed. And that's pretty much most of my background.
Great. Thank you. Daryl?
Hi, Daryl Settles. I'm president of Catalyst Ventures Development. Been in the Boston market since the mid 80s and have pretty much done quite a bit of things. Started as an engineer, got into real estate development, hospitality industry, and now just do investments. And so it's been great, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. David?
David is not on.
Oh,
He
let's
hasn't made it as
let's
a-
keep going with our panel.
Yep.
We'll just let each one jump in. Roger?
Just a three
Okay.
you have there, Kurt. Yep.
Okay,
Darryl,
all right. I didn't know
Sydney,
if
and Val. Yep.
substituted someone for David. Okay, well, that's great. Well, we're going to have a lovely conversation because we've got a range of perspectives on how to get there. So let's start with defining what wealth is for you, because I think if we can't decide on that, we can't decide how to get there. So let me throw that to Darryl first and hear his thoughts.
Well, I always consider that a loaded question, but I guess, you start off, you want to have a healthy life, a healthy family. And I have two wonderful kids, and we're very fortunate, but also think that, I strive for the max, and I want to be able to be in an environment where I'm able to do whatever I want to do in moderation. And so, wealth to me is having enough funds and available money to do that. And so I strive every day to leave money to my family, which is, I think, another question later on. But I've done well, and I'm happy to be able to see a bigger picture for my kids, and especially what we've gone through during the last year. It's even more important today to build a legacy that can grow even at a higher rate in a faster way.
So we probably could all have different views of this, and if someone else would want to jump in, Val, looks like you're ready. Well, you're on mute. Okay.
So almost 75.
I said, I actually love this question. The day after I left Wellington, I took my kids on this incredible trip around the world. And one of the places that my children loved the most, and the place that we loved, the attraction that we loved the most, were the pyramids. And I was just fascinated by the fact that this pyramids are the only of the original 7 wonders of the world that remain. And so I just started studying these pyramids, like in order of magnitude. If the pyramids last this long, the other one lasted this long in terms of time. So I thought, how do we create pyramidal wealth? Let's redefine the negative of pyramidal, but just this like strong, lasting generational wealth for ourselves. And so I thought of these 4 sides, and I think one, it starts with you personally. Are you personally wealthy? How do you feel about you? And I think this is so critical, because if you don't feel good about you, when you get those microaggressions, not if, but when you get those microaggressions, it's going to be really hard to handle it, because what somebody else says will define who you are, and you aren't grounded in who you are. So it's personal. I think it's spiritual. The other side, the 4 sides of this pyramid, financial, and then it's societal. What do we do for other people? So I love the dinner group. And how do we make society better? So that's my definition of wealth. It's comprehensive, and financial is just but one piece.
Yeah, I agree with everything Darryl and Val are saying. I think I frame it in a slightly different way, which is money is kind of what sustains you, and then wealth is what helps you reach your goals. And I think there's sort of an obligation in a certain sense to have wealth, not just for wealth's sake, but to empower and reach those goals, whether that's supporting your family, building those memories, or is it supporting and empowering your community, or is it building a business and adding value in that sense? I think there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but I think the trap is when you think about money as being stagnant and a safety net rather than something that allows you to reach your goals.
No, that's fantastic.
Hi,
Great
Kurt.
perspective. I see, David, yes, you just joined us. So now we've got another leg to our wealth creation stool. And David, we gave everyone a moment to introduce themselves, but you come from a financial planning background. So you're going to offer something here. So if you'd just like to give a half a minute on you, that'd be great.
Certainly. I've spent most of my, and thank you very much. I spent most of my
professional career in the financial services industry. About 20 years with a mutual fund company and the past 10 years in wealth management. And what really gets me excited about wealth management is to see the fruits of my labor and to help people and see how I impact people's lives, their children's lives, their grandchildren's life.
Great. So thank you. Well, perfect segue to the question, which is, how would you get there from here? You know, whatever you just defined as wealth creation, what would your first step be? And David, since you just got on and we didn't start with you, why don't you keep going with that?
The first thing one needs to do is develop a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. And because I come from wealth management, I'll take this from wealth management point of view. So find a trusted advisor and help define what your goals are. Develop a roadmap, determine how long it's going to take to get there, what you need to get there, and then I like to work backwards. So you know where you want to be, you know how much money you need, you know how much you want to spend, and so that should help determine what the asset allocation is. But the other thing, it takes more than a plan, and I like to think of things as a stool. So you need to get the investments right, you need to get the planning right, and you need to prepare the family for the money. And if the family is not prepared for the money, and then the result will not be what you hope and what you think it'll be.
Okay, great. So let's assume we've accumulated a little wealth. We're feeling good about ourselves, and now we want to step it up. You know, how do we get to the next level? You felt comfortable, and I'm gonna jump in with, let's see, Daryl, tell me, you accumulated a little wealth. Now you're leveling up. What are you doing?
Well, I guess it all depends upon your risk factor, right? And so I'm a risk taker. And so, you know, I have $0 in the stock market, and I know Valerie doesn't want to hear that. You know, all of my risks are just scattered around. You know, it is, you know, mixed use housing. It's tech companies, a painting company, casino hospitality operations. And to me, it is, you know, at this point in life, I know a lot of people, and I think you need to build up your network, because once you have that network, you get access to a lot of things. And so I bet my wages on people and ideas. And if I feel good about them, I go with them. And I've had a good hit. You know, you lose a couple. Most of you guys on the line know Jim Cash. He said something to me about, 15 years ago. For every 10 deals that he invests in, one hit, it makes him more wealthy. And the other 9, whether he gets his money back or not, he doesn't really care about. Jim is hitting harder than I am. Let me be clear about that. And so, but I've better hit rate than 1 out of 10. And I think that you got to have the guts to do that. And I think there's another question that you were going to ask earlier about, what would I do differently now to do even better to add to this? And that would be go back and get a joint MBA law degree. I think that is one of the things that really allows you to cut through the chase, save time, and make quick decisions. Because the old adage of time is money is really, really true.
So let me also ask that of Valerie and Sydney. Talk to us about that.
So I agree with one part that Daryl said, in that scared money won't make money. You have to be willing to take some risk. This is true. And when you think about, there's a traditional teaching in the wealth management space that says it's all about diversification. But if in fact, if you go to the tape, there are many people who made a ton of money with concentration. And that's because they bet on them. They had a stock and they put their time and effort into a company, and that did really well. Or in your case, Daryl, companies and or businesses. you were there and you were doing it. But for most people who are working and they're doing something else, diversification makes a lot of sense. And I think that David would confirm that. So you need to have a range of different types of investments, because at some point or another, whatever you've invested in is not going to go so well. And so you put away the money that you're willing to risk losing. But I think the thing that many people just don't fully understand is that if you can't make a whole lot of money, typically, if you aren't willing to risk it. So it's your assets minus your liabilities. So we have to invest more in assets. And many times we don't. And for those who are afraid, because the financial literacy is so low, we don't tend to invest more in stocks, let's say. But over the long run, historically, stocks have done very well. So I think that there are simple things if we're giving advice, like make sure that you max out your 401k if you have one. Like not doing that, you're leaving money on the table. Like the credit cards at 25% or 20%, it makes no sense. So every $1 that you put to a credit card to pay it down, you've got a guaranteed 20% return. So, and I like having some income. So it can be real estate income, which you can get, or you can buy REIT bonds that you know are stable and they have 9 to 10% dividend yields. And you don't have to worry about calling your, you know, and I bought some real estate as well. So you can make money in real estate, but you have to call the engineers, the painters or the plumbers. It's just, you have to commit to that. So I like taking a diversified approach. And the answer, so you have to own the assets, whether it's real estate, and I own some real estate, or stocks, or private equity, or venture, if you can get into that space.
So that's a great segue for you, Sydney. People think venture is risky. You double down on that. Is it helping you level up, or?
So venture in a lot of ways is actually really similar to all other types of investing when you get to that level of wealth and you're trying to get to the next stage, like you were asking earlier, which is you're making a bet on the future. And with real estate, you're making a bet on, you know, certain industries or certain locations. With venture, you're betting on what the future is going to look like in 5-10 years. And that feels really risky, but at the same time, the future is always going to come. Things are always going to change. And if you look at where new money is coming in, it's coming from tech, it's coming from venture investing. That's where the new wealthy people are being made. In terms of has it paid off, every investing takes a period. I have deals that, similar to what Val and Daryl are saying, I'm just trying to kind of forget about them. I'm thinking about the companies. I'm trying to help the companies where I can, but that money it's theirs now. I hope they bring it back, but that's theirs because I believe that they're going to make the future better. And I want to be part of that. But that's a bet I have to make and kind of come to terms with.
So you had some faith in your underwriting skills. It sounds like Daryl believes his underwriting skills could be better if he did a few things differently. Val has a perspective. Let me ask each one of you what your own personal best example of wealth creation might be. Everyone would like to know, if you had to rate the thing you did that was just, you think it was the best thing you ever did or will do. What do you think? Val, start.
One of the best things that I did, like literally, I didn't have a clue about investing. I grew up in inner city Philly. I just did not have a clue. And my CEO said, just put your money into the accounts and don't think about it. So literally every trip that I took, when I got reimbursed, I would just put it into a fund. And then I started putting into a fund for my kids. And I just didn't think about it. And before I knew it, I just amassed a fair amount of funds for my children and for me. Literally, I just didn't think about it. I just put it in the I get a question, what would you say for recent grads? Make sure that you have an S&P 500 index fund. That's the Standard & Poor's largest basket of 500 companies. Just buy it and make sure that you don't see it. So you put it in, you have it automatically deducted out of your account so you don't see it, you aren't tempted to spend it, and call it a day. And if the market sells off, then you buy more. because it just means that the market's on sale. It's not, you know,
Okay.
and if you're young. Now, if you're 65 or you're 60 and you're relying on this for the next 5 years, that's a different story. But if you're young, I would do that. So I think what some of my best advice is to just make it a practice. I mean, now we're talking about mindfulness and people are doing yoga and they're stretching. The practice of investing in you and for you. And the other thing that I did, you said in the definition of wealth, I use mirror time. I think it's really important. We have to use mirror time where we're looking at ourselves and connecting with who we are and just feeling good. Someone asked a question about how do you handle these microaggressions? They're going to come. The market's going to crash. Like, things will happen outside of the things that you can control. But if you are really grounded in who you are with that mirror time, like, I'm good with me. When someone says something that's really inappropriate, you're going to, it can be water off of your back. So that's what I would do.
Great.
I did that.
Fantastic. David, is there something you do that you think killed it and you do again?
When thinking about my best experiences investing, it's just having a process and being consistent, consistently putting money away, investing in what I think I know about, but again, not trying to pull money out because I get scared, put money back in because I get happy. If you look at the last 15 years, the S&P 500 returned 9%. And so your money would have doubled every 8 years. If you would miss the 10 best days, that 9% goes to 4.13%. And so your money would not have even doubled. If you miss the 20 best days, that return would have been 1.17%. And so consistency, long-term horizon. I'm a buy and hold guy, what I say, consistently boring, but have a process, have a plan.
Great. So discipline sounds like there's a thread here. How about Daryl? How about you?
I think mine is short. I think I discovered early that finding and developing passive income is a whole lot better than having a yearly income from a job. And that has driven me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
thanks, Valerie.
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone has said. I think part of the flip side of being disciplined and putting money aside is also really understanding what your spend is and what your need is, because that allows you to take risks with money later. If you start to understand early on, like, okay, I'm spending, let's say it's $3,000 a month or $5,000 a month. And then you realize after 5 years, okay, I put aside all this money, I'm still spending the same. Now I have this flexibility where I can invest in other accounts. I already have this base foundation of where my money is invested in these, these mutual funds, all of that. Now I have this extra 20K, which I don't even need that for a rainy day. I can put that somewhere else. I could put that into a house. I could put that into investing. I could put that into private companies, whatever that means. But I think it starts with having that level of discipline and understanding early on of what it takes for you to what you need to live on, so that later on you're more comfortable taking the risks that actually build wealth.
So that's a great segue to a question for all of you around risk tolerance. Because you just described a scenario where you all built a little nest egg and now you got to decide, are you swinging for the fences? Are you going to swing with half of your money for the fences? Or are you just not a fence swinger? You're going to go take it slow. So David, let's jump in with you. What do you think?
When I think about risk, I define risk as uncertainty. And so if you need certainty, you probably want fixed income. Because you're going to get X plus Y every year. With equities, you could get 2X or you could lose 2X. So you don't have that certainty. And the best way, in my eyes, to mitigate risk, again, is to have that long-term horizon. And so if you are thinking 10, 15, 20 years in the future, you can withstand that volatility or the up and down, and know over time, and using stocks or equities as an example, that over time you're going to make money. And the best thing is put the money away, don't look at it every day, and understand that this is part of the process. The market will go down, but over time, one is going to make money.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, what usually drives your returns is that asset allocation. So I think of it as I'm going to have some in stocks, very little at this point in any bonds, some in real estate. Another really strong, I finished grad school and I bought this 3-family when interest rates were 16%. It was crazy, but it was a cash flow positive, like the cash from one apartment. This was a 3-unit. The cash from one apartment paid the mortgage and insurance. So that's a layup. And I think now with interest rates so low and likely some downward pressure on some of the housing prices, now's a really good opportunity for young people to start to think about buy a house. I can't emphasize enough the importance for buying real estate. And it doesn't matter how small it is because it's the only asset that pays you to own it because of the tax structure. And we can talk offline about why that is. And you have some incredible experts here in the real estate space. But I was like, I don't have anything, but I'm going to buy this property. And it's been great. And so now it generates, because it's going to pay off. And now because the rent goes up over time, what you pay goes down, the mortgage goes away, and then you have this cash machine.
I'm glad you brought up real estate because it really is the cornerstone of wealth creation for America. You can pretty much trace everybody's family's wealth back to the GI Bill or low interest loans, except for Black people, because we were marginalized in accessing real estate. So I'm going to keep going with this question and ask Daryl and then Sydney about your risk tolerances. Where do your investments fit your risk tolerance, and how do you define that?
Well, I would say that you asked, are we still hitting hard or not hitting at all, or are we going to go back and take a nap? So, you know, and I'm lucky to have a wife who also understands business. We deliberately live below our means. And so it allows us a lot of flexibility to swing the bat. And so I am still swinging.
Okay, Sydney?
Yeah, I've spoke with you about this a lot, but my risk tolerance vastly varies depending on the area of my life. So base foundational money, I will always have money in some sort of mutual fund, diversified risk account, etc. And then there's an amount of money that I'm comfortable being very risky with, and whatever that means, which means for me, it means investing it in something that I care about without a promised any kind of return. And I think that's a healthy way to think about it in life in general is, you know, your first career out of college, it's probably better to be more risk averse, but as you move along, you can become, you know, more risky. But it doesn't always need to be the same and consistent throughout your life. You can be, like Daryl said, living below your means in certain areas, and then be kind of pooling towards other areas where you're comfortable being more risky. So I think your risk can be fluid depending on category, but it's also good to have that plan and set out, this is where I've decided I'm going to put my risk. This is where I've decided I'm going to be safe, have my safety net. Right.
No, it's great. So I'd like to throw something out about how folks find their path to their investing success, especially in terms of organizations that people can go to. And, you know, should you join a investment club? Should you join? Should you join Black VC or the Builders of Color Coalition and learn how to, you know, put money in real estate? Any thoughts of organizations that can help folks? Jump in.
Well, you just mentioned you know, NAIOP, you know, there's Urban Land Institute, there's the Builders of Color Coalition. These are all Boston-based. And, you know, there's a lot of online learning because of what happened with the pandemic. So you no longer have to like go to class or go away for a weekend. You can do all of this online at night after your day job ends, or if you don't have a day job, anytime you want to do it. So there's a lot of flexibility there. I just want to add something to this in terms of where we are, you know, since the civil unrest and also the pandemic, and how corporations have come forward to do more than just talk about how do we support initiatives in the minority communities. I mean, they're putting some real money into a lot of the plans that they're coming up with. And this is our chance and our window of opportunity to take advantage of that. And when I think of the leadership that we have in our community now, it is absolutely in our faces that our younger people are leading that effort a lot better than we led it. And I think that that's because they're not afraid to ask for what they want. They're not afraid to shoot for the stars. And now is the time to do that. And I think that it's going to bode well for all of us.
Okay, so I agree with you, but I also think we need to find some paths. So I want to get back to the where do I go question. So I see Sydney nodding. You want to take that? And then David and Val will give you each a shot at that.
Sure, I'm happy to. In one sense, there's of course a lot of paths. And even here, we're talking about real estate, we're talking about venture, we're talking about private equity, private investments, public investments. But there's also, sadly, a lot of uniformity in what makes people successful in our society. There's a couple top firms, honestly, when you look at venture or investment banking, there's a couple top firms when you look at consulting. And the people who come out of these brand name firms in investing or consulting or other industries like that are gonna have a better advantage. I think there is a value to understanding the idea of putting in that investment early on to build up a track record, with the understanding that you kind of have a plan and a long-term goal and something you care about if you're interested in that level of flexibility. And so that is one path that I think can be really promising. But there's also paths early on where you can think about the riskier approach of starting a company or joining an early company, or joining a bigger company to then do something else that is a little bit less certain and promising, but also allows you to try out things early on that you think you'll like and not necessarily waste the time building a track record towards something you might not end up not wanting to do. But I will say for me personally, and I think for Black people in the US, having credibility and brand names and education on your resume sadly has been huge for our communities.
Right. No, I agree with you. How about Dave and Val? Any thoughts about this? Where to go to get going or get further down the path to wealth creation organizations?
I will answer that where one could go to build wealth. And I'll go back to finding that trusted advisor. Someone can help you with that plan so you are not planning to fail. And also I'll go back to, I call it the stool, where you have the three legs: the investments, the planning, and also the financial literacy. And I really want to harken on financial literacy, because one of the ways we African Americans are going to build wealth is if we pass it from generation to generation. And I mentioned earlier, preparing the family for the money. If we have a lot of money, but the next generation isn't prepared to handle, to manage that money is going to be squandered. And so that's why I think it's critically important that all three work together for that individual, for that family. And so that's why I think it's critically important to find that trusted advisor to help.
So panel.
We're gonna.
Yeah. So views make markets. So Daryl, don't take this the wrong way. I mean, not Daryl, David. I do think that the trusted advisor serves a role, but I come at it from a slightly different perspective. I think that trusted advisors can add value depending on where you are in your wealth. If we're talking to younger people, I don't think that they should find a trusted advisor. I'm just going to take a different view. I think trusted advisors are expensive. And I think that if you go to investor.gov, I tell everybody, my family, my kids' friends, go to investor.gov and just put in, what can you start with? How much can you put away each month, and put in 9% plus or minus 1. That's 9% return plus or minus 1. And then what you'll see is that over time, if you're 25 or you're 30 and you go until you're 65, the differential of what somebody can earn if they just put money in the S&P 500 index fund, nothing else, just, I mean, if they only did that, the wealth that they could create, and the extent to which a 1% fee or 2% fee will impact their returns. So I do think that if you have resources, it makes sense to go to a trusted advisor, because you're managing insurance company, their insurance and wills and trusts and things of that sort. But for people who are starting out, I think that is not a good idea, because the fees are too high. And Fidelity, what I love about Fidelity, I'll give them a plug, is that what's her name? What's Fidelity's head's name? I'm just going blank.
Bill Johnson.
Abby Johnson.
Again?
Abby.
Abby, yeah, Abby came in, took over from Ned and said, look, for the first time, she lowered the minimums to $0. So people can get started with $10, which is huge. And they were really bold, and they said for a core set of funds, it's completely free. So there are no fees on the S&P 500 index fund and a few others, even some bond funds, no fees and no limits. So I say, if you want to get started, that's what you go with. And I interviewed Wellington and Vanguard used to be the same firm. And I had a chance to introduce the founder of Vanguard. Interview him right before he passed. And he was the one that everybody thought he was crazy by saying, no, just go with low fees. And don't worry about having the mutual fund. If you look at the fees and you unpack the fees of the mutual fund, they are so high. And so you as an investor, you end up with much, much, much less. So if you're getting started, start off simple. If you have a whole lot and you need to get a lot explained, then call David Walker, because he's good.
Great. So I know Emerson has some questions for all of you that are coming.
Yes, a boatload of questions in the chat. Great conversation, and I wish I stumbled on all of you 30 years ago, I guess. But this is for Sydney. How do you become a venture capitalist? Like, how do you even enter that world?
There's really two ways. So one is you invest your own money, or the other is you invest other people's money. That's the basic way of putting it. So if you're investing your own money, it means you have either private wealth, high net worth individual, or you raise a fund from other people, whether that's friends and family, other high net worth individuals, limited partners, pension funds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Go on. The other is investing other people's money. And so that would be, you could come in at an analyst level. I came into venture out of undergrad, or you could come in as an associate, generally after a couple of years in investment banking, private equity, consulting, something like that. And then there's the people who come in at sort of the principal partner and above level, which is where you're really starting to have some check writing power. And those are generally people with either some investing or operational experience. So people who invested their own money, or people who founded a startup that did really well. But I actually think that the most interesting way to get into venture now, especially for people who are kind of midway in their career, is to look into some of the scouting or angel investing opportunities. Scouting is when a fund will give you a set amount of money to invest on behalf of the firm. A lot of times they'll give it to either experts in a field or entrepreneurs that they think have a really good eye. And some firms will have 0, but some firms might have 10, 20, 30 plus scouts at a time. And this is a really good way to build a track record, especially if you're coming from a non-venture background and you have some expertise. So utilizing that expertise to get to know venture firms and say, I can advise your startups on enterprise security communication software. I am the person in my field. I've written the content pieces. I've built the relationships. I can introduce you to startups that you don't even know are happening because I'm already advising them. So a lot of people don't actually know that they're already kind of in the venture space because they don't realize that the companies they're advising or the expertise they're offering in their industry are already really relevant to venture. So I encourage people who are already kind of midway through their career and starting to get interested in venture to really think about how do they get their hands on other people's money, but still being allowed to be independent.
That sounds great. I don't know if that's easy, but that sounds tremendous.
No, definitely not easy.
On this call, we have individuals who are moving along in their career. And so any advice around starting investing later in life? Maybe Val or David, for the ones of us who are maybe, past that corner, if you will. How do we start at this point in our lives?
You want to take that, or you want me to start? I have a nephew, and he says, like, those big southern trees that you plant deep in the South, like the best time to plant that tree was 30 years ago, and the second best time is today, right? So just get started. And someone asked, well, what about COVID? If someone thought COVID is going to slow the economy and they said, no, I'm not going to invest, they would have missed out on an incredible amount of rallying that happened. And because you have time on your side still, you want to invest. And so the reason I talked about that investor.gov thing is because there's this little formula called the compounding interest. Like, businesses are bought and sold off of this little 4-factor formula. If you know 3 of the factors, you can derive the third. It's time, it's amount, and it's the rate of return. And so the reason I put in that investor.gov compounding interest calculator is because you can see the impact that these little small fees have, and that will help you make different decisions. For example, there are tax benefits to your maxing out your 401k, and many people don't do that even when they can. That's one thing you want to do. The other thing is you might have if you can, a Roth IRA, because many people put money in a RIA, in a 401k. When you get ready to retire, you're going to have taxes on that. But the Roth IRA, you will not have any taxes on that, and you want to do that. There are tax advantage programs that your firm might offer that it's confusing, but spend the time to understand that, because each one is like, it's literally free money. So it's free money. And you can put things into trust now. There's a great company called Trust and Will, and the firm that I'm creating, we're embedding them on our platform. And so normally it would cost $5,000 or more to set up a trust. Now it's $500, and we don't often think about that. So you might put away something for yourself, but you really have time on your side if you have children. Set up a trust for your children, and you can put in some parameters around it. For $500, put your home in a trust. And normally we don't think about that. That's what wealthy folks have thought about all their life, because people are sitting around the table talking about it. So I think it's just powerful. And then if you get extras, Daryl talked about having this income, passive income, which is a beautiful thing. I would say it is, and to the extent that you can protect it in a trust, because many of us don't have the basics like wills. And if you don't have the will, when something happens to you, then your money 50% goes to the government. And so it's simple things that we just don't really talk about. And I think it's really important. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes. David, anything?
And one more thought, Emerson. What Val said was very interesting. If you couldn't invest 30 years ago because of the tree, invest now. What investing now does, it allows your principal and the earnings you generate from that principal to grow over time. And so you're getting a double compounding effect. The principal is compounding by the rate of return, and the earnings that you earned the year before are growing by that rate of return. And so that is a very, very powerful property. And so the sooner you get started, the sooner you can start accumulating the wealth again off the principal and off the earnings from the principal.
Wonderful. Daryl, coming to you regarding the passive income and just, perspective on that and what that looks like, maybe for you or for anyone thinking about that, right? And then also another question for you and maybe Val as well in the real estate game. We've heard that the crash is coming, right? What's your perspective on that? Daryl first.
Wow. As you know, I'm probably on 4 or 5 Zoom calls every week regarding real estate. And I would say that the majority of the speakers anticipate not a hard crash, but a correction in the real estate market, especially in major cities. I think, it's always great to invest in real estate in a down market. And we will have some of those opportunities here in the Boston market. So you asked earlier about, what should people do who are a little older now and they want to get into the market? Finding multifamilies, even if you bought them with another family, if you can get them at the right price. It's amazing how much, young kids pay for rent here in the Boston area. Where they can, Kurt did this when he was in his early 20s, I believe. He and 3 friends bought a home in Fort Hill. And, look where he is today. And so starting early, making sure that your money is working for you and growing at the same time is a valuable thing.
Right. That's a good point. I also think it helps to look at your household and decide how to have a diversification in what everybody does. Not everybody has to, back to the swing for the fences idea, but if somebody's holding down the fort, someone else can take more risk. So, maybe think about your own house and say, do we all need to be just, putting one foot in front of the other, or does somebody get to run and someone's going to walk, and maybe it's a team effort?
Kurt, and maybe Val as well, this perspective around taking care of your debts and then investing, or carrying a balance of both. You're invested, but you're also carrying some debt as well. What's your perspective on that?
I would say that you do want to max out on because of the compounding effect that David was talking about, I would say max out on your 401ks for sure. But many young people have high costs of debt. I would say first become aware of where you are, because not everybody knows what is the cost of my credit card debt or credit card debts. Credit cards, there are many, and so you want to take sort of the approach where you want to pay off the most expensive. So if you have one, the national average for credit card rates are 17%, and this is when interest rates, generally speaking, and certainly in the front part of the curve, even in the 10-year, they're at historic lows, less than 1% for the 10-year, historic lows. Yet credit card is at 17%. So I think about it, if the long-term Ibsen data suggests that you might be able to get 10%, and many people are thinking that going forward it's going to be lower, it doesn't make sense to put your resources into the stock market first when you have loaded with liabilities. Again, it's assets minus liabilities. If you pay down that 17%, it's like getting a 17% return in the stock market. If you pay down that 20%, it's guaranteed return. So I would encourage focusing on lightening that load.
So it would be interesting to get Sydney's take. She just started business school and had to take on a lot of debt. Maybe help us think about that. That's one of the biggest burdens that a lot of people have, right?
Right. Well, there's a lot of math behind it. If Val just got into the interest rates of saving versus taking on debt, and how you can compare those, and it can still be more beneficial to actually take on debt if you're still able to make investments. So it's a really interesting time in the market right now, and it kind of needs to be looked into closely. Since I'm not an official financial advisor, I won't get into any of that. I think the interesting way to think about it is also in terms of your future income and what you want to do. So for me, I understand that I'm able to take that kind of risk because of my past income, as well as my anticipated future income and the income of future graduates from my college, past graduates from my college. But there's a lot of situations where taking on that kind of debt isn't worth it, especially in boom times. If your career is moving really quickly, your rate of income increase is much greater than what would be happening over the course of time after you graduate. That would be a time where I think it would be valuable to put it off, especially because there really is no age where it's too late to get a graduate degree. So I think it is much more dependent on situation and life circumstance than it used to be in the past, in part because there's so much of a difference between income for different education levels, and also because our economy's been so volatile.
Great. Darryl, real quick, you had mentioned some not-for-profits and organizations within communities that are helping people, gain experience around investing, et cetera. Yes, the hundreds of folks that we have on this panel, or in this room are many of them from Boston, many of them are from around the country, and so the types of experiences that one would get from an entity like the one you mentioned, how can they find them in their local communities?
Google. Google would be the first start. But I think here it is actually doing your homework and being intentional about gathering the knowledge and the education that to take advantage of whatever industry or investment that you want to participate in. And I think that we always we feel like it's going to happen the easy way or that we're going to get lucky. I'm not one, and I have a brother who plays the stock market, not the stock market, but the scratch cards, what you call it, the lottery every day. I'm not leaving my future, to getting lucky with the lottery. I will educate myself as much as possible. The other thing that I do and have done over the years is, you also have to be intentional about who you spend your time with. More than often, you are a product of your environment and who you're around. And so I would tell you that my inner circle are, somewhat light years ahead of me, but, it helps me because I'm always trying to, get higher. And so it doesn't bother me that they are much, more successful or have more experience than I do, because I'm okay gaining it. And sometimes we all believe that we're smarter than the next person. I'm always asking for advice, and I probably take 80% of it. Most of us take less than 50% of the advice that we receive.
Well, and I think that's a good point, because I think you can partner towards success.
Yes.
You may have half of the equation. If you can find somebody that has the other half, 50% of success is better than 100% of failure. So if you're an accountant and you want to get into owning triple decker, homes, go find a builder who needs your accounting skills and figure out how to get together. Make him better. He'll make you better. You'll both end up with some investments, and suddenly you're in the development business, right?
Right.
Yeah,
when investing,
quickly add on, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, especially when it comes to doing your homework. I think if you go to someone and in an industry that you care about and you ask them for help, and you're starting at level 0, you're going to get to level 1. If you're at level 1 and you ask them for help, you're going to get to level 3, and so on and so forth. And that's in part because you're starting from a better point of knowledge, but also because you're able to engage with them more and offer more. You're able to help them think about things in a different perspective. So even these organizations like my nonprofit, like the people who end up making the most out of being involved with Black VC are the people who have done their research ahead of time and know where they want to go, and they know what questions to ask. And I think that's also true with any kind of wealth building.
Yeah. David?
And I would say, find your edge, and edge being your competitive advantage. Is it your education? Is it your network? Are there additional resources that allow you to have an edge so you can be more successful in what you're doing?
Yeah. So David and Sydney, I think you just wrapped up your piece with some really, really good advice. Darryl and Val, one point you want to leave us with as we wrap up. Val, maybe you first.
I'll go first.
Yep.
No, Val, go first.
It's okay. You can go. I don't mind.
So I would just say, do your homework. Read the newspaper or online every day in the community that you're in, so you know what's happening. You're always better positioned when you know what's happening in the future. Most of us never take the time to find out what's going on. And, knowledge is critical. Knowledge is power. Use the power.
Thank you, Darryl. Val?
Yeah, I there's a lot of information out here, and I was reading some of the questions where many people are saying, well, where do we go? How do we get the information? What about our youth? How do we get them? I think that the more we can expose people to the possibilities with specific examples, the more young and old can say, wow, that's possible. Like, and when I talked about trust and will, that's possible. Like, why most people have houses and they aren't in trust. And if you could say that, you know, if you're older and you say, I want to put this into my children's name, we don't normally think about things like that. So I just think that we can create a community, whether it's with the dinner club, of resources that are shared. And maybe we have continuous conversations around strategies that we can use to build wealth. It is totally within our reach, but it's not like, if we didn't have the dinner table conversations that other communities have had, where the father and mother together are sharing with their kids what can happen, we can create our own.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage that.
We're coming back to you, Val. Most definitely. All right, Kurt, back to you, man, to wrap it up. Thank you very much. That was awesome.
This was an amazing panel, and I love the diversity of thought, you know, represented here. I would say there's not one eureka moment or solution to wealth creation. There may be bad times to deploy one of these strategies. So every moment has the right tool. Right now, interest rates are extremely low. You would be very wise to refinance something, because they probably won't be this low again for a very long time. So this is a moment where that's appropriate. Another time it might not be a good time to buy a house because it's a 15% interest rate. So what I'd like to say is that this is really the essence of our people. As people of color, we are have been denied frequently the access to wealth creation, and especially generational wealth creation. So there is no bad time to start, old, young. I think we got it all here, including old heads like me. So get in the game, start building your wealth, start transferring your wealth, and let's go get it. That's it.
Thank you so much for that. Something that Daryl said that I just wanted to throw out too. There is this notion of bird dog. So if people go out and they find, like, some people with resources don't have time, and sometimes people with time might not have resources. But if you find properties, you might bring it to a suite of people with resources to say, okay, we'll put up some money, and then you split the ownership. So if you find those great deals that Daryl wants to invest in, he has a fund, or we might have some funds that we can put aside. I think that might, on the real estate side, because of the rates that people are charged, the rents that people are charging. I just wanted to throw that out as something else that.
Great.
Good point,
Thank you, Val. And we're gonna need to stop there. I apologize.
No, thanks.
Leading into the next session. Thank you. That was tremendous. And stay with us. Coming up next, we're going to hear from some top life professionals and really get a sense as to how they've made their way in their career. At this point, I just want to note, really thankful to, or I want to thank our sponsors, Liberty Mutual, Sanofi, MFS Financial as our ally sponsors, and then Sodexo, Tufts, Dana-Farber, Eastern Bank, Vertex Foundation Medicine, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Mass General Brigham, Wellington. Hope I didn't miss anyone, but thank you all. Capital One, thank you all for your support. All right, coming up next is our Career Strategies at Work panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you don't mind turning your cameras on just to make sure you're all there. Thank you. I see Jerry.
Trying to get my camera to start.
Andrew, good to see you. Marquez, good to see you. I'm glad you don't have Dolphin Stadium in the background there, like trying to rub it in.
It's good to be here. It's raining though today, so it's a little wet, a little damp.
That's
good.
right. You got a little tropical storm happening over there.
Yeah, rain in South Florida. Who would have thought that?
Cedric, good to see you as well, and Rogelio, hermano, good to see you. So,
pleasure.
Good. I think we got. I think we have everyone, right? Andrew, yeah. I think we have everyone. So, Jerry, whenever you're ready.
I'm trying to stop my camera and it's frozen.
We can see you.
We can see you, Jerry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you. Yeah.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yeah.
Yes,
fantastic. Can you still see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm having some video on my end where I'm not sure if you can see or hear me, but if you say yes to both, I'm fine. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome to everyone to the panel discussion on career strategies that work. We're going to be focusing during this discussion on specific strategies, tactics, influences that have helped the panelists we have tonight get to where they are. My name is Dr. Jerry Cox. I'm an executive coach for 30 years here in the Boston area. I'd like to very quickly introduce the panel, beginning with Cedric. If you just say a word about yourself, and I'll move on to the next person.
Absolutely, Jerry. So I'm Dr. Cedric Terrell. I'm the Vice President and Chief Pharmacy Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. Pleasure to be with you guys.
Andrew? How about Andrew?
Yep, I'm here. Andrew Kelly, NC State, MIT, HBS, on my third startup. And it's a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Terrific. Athelstan?
Hey, everyone. Athelstan Bellarand. I'll keep it concise like Andrew. UPenn, HBS, Goldman Sachs, Bain. I'm currently working at Tufts Health Plan, Director of Strategy and Business Performance for commercial products.
And Rogelio?
Hey, hello, everybody. Rogelio Guzman, Roger Guzman. I'm at Mass General Brigham in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Terrific. What we're going to do in the half hour or so that we have the panel discussion is have each person respond to a question that he's already selected. And then about 5:35 or so, we're going to move into a question and answer phase in which you'll send your questions over to the chat room, and then they'll get to us and we'll try to field them. Okay? Let me just begin by framing the context in which these panelists have had to navigate in order to achieve their success. A recent study by the Society of Human Resource Management this summer indicated that of 49% of Black HR professionals agree that race and ethnic discrimination exists in their workplace, whereas only 13% of white professionals agree. So with that kind of discrepancy, you can see the kind of environment that our panel has had to operate in and navigate in, and all the more credit to them for having achieved the success that they have achieved. So with that background, I'm gonna ask Cedric to begin with some of the early influences that might have gotten you started on your path, on your career path, that ultimately helped you get to where you are. Things like your family, people, organizations, what have you. Do you want to take that on, Cedric?
Yeah, sure will. So thank you, Jerry. I would start with first, like you called out, family. I'm from a military family. My father was in the Navy for 20 plus years. And so for me, I guess the foundation was really around discipline and thinking about the future and approaching life methodically. Now, I was a hellion. And so with that being said, he had to recruit a lot of other people around me to help me steer straight in regards to where I wanted to go in my life. I think the second part I would say So there's family, but then there's the larger community involvement and engagement. And probably the most influential piece for me was teachers in school. It probably wasn't until high school where where it all clicked, and I realized that in order for me to be successful, I needed to apply myself. I was fortunate enough where I didn't really apply myself early on in grade school, but in high school is where it clicked on. I needed to. And so I had a teacher, Miss Isles, that was pretty stern and heavy-handed if need be, and guided me in the right direction, and then connected me with a great deal of mentors. At the time, I didn't realize they were fraternal brothers. And I want to say what's up to all my fraternal brothers, Omega Psi Phi. And then from there, I had mentors that helped me on my career, more so from coaching. So I played sports. So I had coaches in the football and soccer arena that helped me understand the role that teams play, the role of leadership, the role of practice. And if you are focused on success happens from a daily practice, not from a one-time event. And so I would say those were probably the pivotal aspects of my growth. And I've learned through the NGE program that obviously, Jared, that you're part of, is the concept of personal board of directors. So I had these direct mentor sponsors, if you will, and then my indirect is my team of my A team, or my spiritual team that I say is the universe, my spirit of angels, and obviously my hereditary spirits that guide me along the way. And that personal board of directors has changed as I've grown in my career. And if we get a chance, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But don't want to take up too much time on it, but I thought that would give you a little bit of sense of role models in my life.
Sure, and thanks a lot. Also, an early factor in getting folks off on the right foot and being on a successful path is education. Whether it's you had a favorite subject, whether there were things that turned you on, whether you excelled in a particular topic in high school or college. Andrew, could you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland on a working produce farm. For advanced calculus in my high school, we had a videotape that me and one other dude were told to go into the library and go watch this and teach yourself calculus. So there were not a lot of opportunities. I literally was reading encyclopedias. I was very fortunate enough to have an uncle who lived in North Carolina. So, because I had to pay for school myself, there was no money. And so out-of-state tuition at NC State was cheaper than in-state tuition at Maryland. I could do the math. So I went to NC State for undergrad, good engineering program. I would not have gotten into MIT without a research advisor during my undergrad, where I was working in an optics lab, and he helped me understand that a National Science Foundation fellowship makes you portable. It gives you tuition, it gives you room and board. And so as long as you're not a jackhole, any research advisor is going to want you. And so I applied to MIT, Caltech, Cornell, Carnegie Mellon, and like two others. There were 7. I got into all of them. And it's because I was portable. My grades were okay. I had like a 3.7, my GMATs, GREs, like all that stuff was fine, right? Not GMATs, but GRE for graduate school. So at MIT, I was very fortunate to find a number of different mentors. And so I actually cut a PhD program short, started a company, and that led me to spending time in Hong Kong, standing up manufacturing. We raised $60 million. We had I'm fast friends now with all 4 other co-founders that I had at the time. And so that kind of experience plus MIT got me into HBS, but I didn't get there on my own. I was lucky enough to find a woman who was an admissions director at the Duke MBA program who read all of my essays and said, this is how you need to tweak these essays so that it resonates with the admissions directors at Harvard, right? And so that allowed me to kind of like step by step, like there's people that are over my shoulder and they don't all look like me, right? And they're very diverse, right? And so those are the people that helped me get an education that, I am very lucky to have coming from nothing.
Hey, Jerry, just Paul here, interceding for a quick second. I know Marquez has had a chance to introduce himself. But can you turn on your camera? We lost you. I know you were sharing your screen, and that's why we couldn't see the other panelists. If you can, that would be great. If not, then we'll continue. But I just want to point out that Marquez had, I know you're a Patriots fan, and that's why you didn't want Marquez to go yet. So I get it.
No, what I was trying to tell you, and I sent you an email, Paul, is that I'm getting a message saying that my screen is the specific error message is that, I'll tell you exactly what it says. It says that
well,
we can hear you, Jerry. It's okay. We
can hear you fine. And
you can hear me fine.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
It says fail to start video camera. Please select another video camera in settings.
Oh, you might be using, you might be in another either Zoom session or you're another program that is using your camera. So if you close out of everything except for Zoom, you should be able to use it.
So close out everything.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, why don't we turn over to Marquez? Sorry.
Yeah, no. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Marcus Jackson with Miami Dolphins. I head up our partnership marketing and business solutions teams, originally from Boston, Mass, and been down here in Miami for about a year now. So excited to be a part of this panel.
All right, so it looks like we lost Jerry, and so we'll wait for him to come back. So I'm just going to improvise, and I'm going to ask you all, and now obviously I don't have the questions in front of me, but I think, one thing that folks always want to know, what are the top 2 things, 3 things that you feel made you successful in your career? And I think Jerry is, there he is. So Jerry, I was improvising and sort of taking over for you. So, well, you were quick. So
I'm glad you did, man. I'm glad you did.
So I will let you continue, and maybe I'll get my question in when we come back.
Okay. So Rogelio, you wanted to talk about the combined pressures of being in an organization that, as the statistic I read at the top indicated, namely most white HR professionals don't see discrimination in the workplace, whereas the majority of Black folks do. How do you thrive and succeed, as you've obviously done, in an environment where you're dealing with discrimination and under the pressure of performing well enough to get you to the point where you are an executive? How do you manage those kinds of competing dynamics? Did you hear me, Rogelio?
Oh, okay. No, I didn't hear my name. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah. How do you manage in an environment where it's clear that discrimination exists, and yet you are also able to succeed well enough to become promoted to the level of executive? What kind of pressures are you under, and how do you navigate them?
Yeah, I would say it's connections. It's having people to talk to. It's knowing where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and then being able to find people that can buttress that, right, and can help you with that. So that's what sustained me, is having someone that I can talk to that will understand who I am, understand why I'm coming to them, and then continue to outperform as much as I can possibly outperform. Think a few steps ahead of where my job is and what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's how I've been able to make it.
So you say people providing some support for you. What kind of people were they, or are they? Are they in your organization? Are they outside of the organization? Are they both? Are they managers, co-workers?
Yeah, Jerry, they're both. They're inside the organization. They're outside the organization. I've my professional career has spanned working at State Farm, Walmart, TJX, Apple, and now at Mass General Brigham. And I stay connected to folks from all of those organizations. And so it helps me to understand what's going on there, that I can better understand what's going on with myself. And I have some coworkers that I connect with, and then I carefully seek out people that are, a couple of pay grades above me, who are in the know and understand what's going on, because you want to understand what the flow is. Where's the organization going? And as much as they can possibly help you with that, that's what I seek out, is to try to understand, like I said, try to stay 2 to 3 steps ahead of where my job is going.
I hear you. And, that's an excellent segue into the next question I have about fitting in. People of color don't often find the red carpet waiting for them when they arrive at a job scene. As a matter of fact, they often find all kinds of barricades and obstacles. What about having the resources and help of someone to help you with the culture, understanding what the people you need to be in touch with are, who they are, how to connect with them, how to establish the kind of relationships that you can build on, where even though you're fitting in is difficult enough, you're getting some help with that from someone. You want to take a crack at that, Alison?
Sure. So yeah, Thelston Bellarand, everyone. Pleasure again to be with you. So I've actually worked at a couple of types of organizations in my career. I've worked at professional services organizations, financial services, management consulting, and I've worked in healthcare, Mass General and Tufts Health Plan, in very different environments. And earlier in my career, you'd sort of come into these organizations either after undergrad or after graduate school in classes. And so there'd be waves of people that come, and there will be folks that are in your peer group, sort of a peer network group. And there will also be people that are ahead of you that have also done that job a year or two prior. And, early in my career, I leveraged those relationships with those people to try to, we were sort of all in it together in very difficult, competitive, cutthroat environments. But then again, we're trying to all get ahead, and some folks were having an easier time than others. People that were, similar age, but maybe just a little bit older, had been through it before, and you kind of gain advice from those individuals as well. And so that's what I did. I found that very, very helpful, really leveraging my peer network. What I found was when I transitioned outside of that into sort of a healthcare environment, I was a little bit of a round peg in a square hole. I didn't have the same type of supports that I felt in some of these other organizations, which is, and so I had to learn how to build my peer network. I had relationships with folks that were senior to me. They're the way that I got my job. But I had to find opportunities to meet other people in an organization that was very large, that didn't have I didn't have natural counterparts. So I had to seek them out by going to events, networking events, finding ways to certain meetings or organizations that were sort of within the company that I got involved with. Then I'd ask people to lunch, ask them to after work cocktails, 15 minutes of your time trying to explain an issue that I'm having, that I'm struggling with and trying to resolve. And, you'd be surprised for those that may feel uncomfortable reaching out to folks for help, how important that can be and how instrumental it can be to your own development and advancement. People are generally eager to help and willing to give you great advice. And so I leverage that in my current positions now.
You mentioned people who are willing to help. So I'm tossing this out to others as well as you. Has that been your experience of others on the panel, that when you've been in situations similar to Alison's, that when you reached out for help, when you felt alienated, isolated, et cetera, that people were generally willing to support you or help you?
Yeah, I'm happy to step in here. I know from my experience, I've been through many different organizations on the traditional corporate side, working for big brands like the Coca-Cola Company or Reebok, or as recent as Miller Coors. Now, obviously here on the team side with the Miami Dolphins. I feel like when you're intentional about ultimately reaching out and establishing that peer network, that's when you do realize that people are willing to help and willing to serve as a resource for you, particularly as you try to navigate through certain challenges or just navigate through your career in general. People are always willing to pretty much provide good perspective and advice. But I think it really starts with being intentional and really taking that first step and being proactive, because people will essentially carve out the time, particularly if you're putting forth your due diligence and making sure that the time that you do spend with them, or the time or the questions that you do ask, are purposeful. And so when they understand kind of what your mission is, or what your objectives are, kind of coming into the relationship or the network, they are more apt to essentially help you navigate through, if it's challenges or if it's questions that need to be addressed. I think I found that to be very beneficial in my career, particularly when I've been intentional. But I think on the flip side of that is having a fundamental understanding of what's your objectives, what's your purpose, as it relates to what you're trying to get out of the networking relationship there.
So you're mentioning intentional as a pretty strong factor in that. Anyone else have any other experiences to add to their success in terms of an environment where you weren't handed the job and all the requirements on a silver platter and had to be creative and resourceful? Any other factors that helped you in addition to being intentional?
Yeah, so Andrew Kelly here. I will say that although there are many opportunities for improvement, one of the things that I like most about Dell is there is a culture of one-on-ones. You could be a relatively junior person and get access to a VP who would spend 20 minutes with you having a coffee. And so if you could imagine doing that kind of once a month with people that have a vested interest in trying to like help you navigate the organization and helping you try to get to the next level, and you don't take advantage of that, then that's on you. Right now, not every place has like that kind of openness and that kind of culture, but I think networking is exactly what you get out of it, right? Or what you put into it is exactly what you get out of it. And so that intentionality, when I have people that come to me and they do not know what their ideal title is in 5 years, or they do not know where they want to be in 5 years, I cannot help them, right? I need people to narrow things down just a little bit so that I can maybe weaponize my network, or weaponize people that I know that industry or that sector or that geography or whatever the case may be, so that it can be meaningful and impactful to them. And so it's a two-way street, but I think that there are lots of ways to, whether it's a Dell-like culture where there's lots of one-on-ones, or it's another culture, that intentionality is so important in making sure you get out of networking what you put in.
I know I sound as if I'm beating this particular question to death, but also but it's an important one, because being isolated or the only one or handful in an organization and needing to navigate the culture in order to survive and succeed is important. What about the existence of other people of color in the organization? Were you able to, where there were them, were you able to identify them? Were you able to work with them? There are employee resource groups. Were any of those helpful along the way as well for any of you?
Yeah, Jerry, I was going to mention employee resource groups. When I got asked to consider Walmart as a career option, that's what helped me make my decision. I was invited, while I was there for an interview, I was invited to a dinner that had people from a particular employee resource group. And I was able to talk to them, without the filter of a recruiter or a hiring manager or anyone like that, and really get the real story around culture. And I was also going to say that when I've considered a different job opportunity, that's one of the questions that's top of my list, asking about the culture of the organization. What's it really like? What are the things, what are pitfalls? Where have people stumbled? Is there someone like myself that I can talk to? So I try to create my own path in terms of understanding the organization, and not just rely on the recruiter who obviously wants to present a really good picture, right? I want to be able to pull that back and explore it myself, because that's an important decision to make.
Yeah. It is. And what prepared you to develop that mindset of basically interviewing the company, hiring the company that you were going to be affiliated with before signing on the dotted line? What prepared you for that? Because a lot of people unfortunately, when they're offered a job, don't go that far into the weeds, so to speak, of finding out more details about the culture and what the history of it is, and so on and so forth. What prepared you for those kinds of questions of probing and intentionality? Anything in your personalities, anything in your training, in your experiences?
Yeah.
Is that an open question, Jerry?
Yes, it is an open question to anyone.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll lean into that. I think for me, the intentionality around that was, again, knowing where I wanted to go. So first, sitting with myself and recognizing where I was and where I wanted to be, and what were the things that I needed to fine tune. I think in a prior session, leveraging the tools that the organization was giving in regards to assessments, personality tests, strength finders, looking at things from a different lens, taking advantage of small little courses that were provided internal until I was in a position where I could take advantage of external resources that were made available from the level from my level within the organization. I'd say I always stayed connected. Now I came up in the healthcare space, so for me, I always stayed connected with national associations and networked with peers in different areas. So I always looked at my organization I was with was my micro system, and then my macro system was building my network so as new things, or as I outgrew my current situation, I could pull on the advocacy and sponsorships that I had outside of my micro system to bring me to the next level of growth that I wanted to see.
I get it.
That's
So
very clear around it.
you're looking a couple of steps ahead, even though you're in a particular situation, and for resources that are going to both help you succeed where you are as well as down the road. Is that a good way of capturing what you just said?
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone
Jerry.
else have experiences that prepared them to be that intentional, that creative in terms of looking both at what they need to survive in their current situation as well as what they need for the next step? Any other strategies that you may have used in the past? Open question.
Jerry, one thing that I would mention is way back when I was at State Farm, I was involved in learning and development, and specifically in executive development. And there were a number of sessions that we did with the top executives at State Farm. And one of the things that we talked about was how executives, their careers get derailed. And many times they don't see it coming, because they're getting a lot of attaboys, and they're getting, some things that kind of point them in one direction. And when they've finally been confronted with the reality of what they have not been doing, it's a shock. So that's what's helped me to really dig and to probe and not pay attention to some of the external noise that I hear. You're doing a good job, this, that, or the other, but really kind of probe what is it that I'm doing, and how is it that I'm helping the organization, because those careers can get derailed very easily without you even knowing it's happening.
You point out a very important issue, Rogelio, and that is the derailment, which too often is something that people are blindsided by. I'll put them in the bucket of obstacles. How about obstacles that you've run into in the journey towards where you are today? Any particular obstacles that stand out, and any advice to the participants of how you handled it, or how you would like to have handled it if you didn't handle it as you would like to have? Obstacles. And this is open.
Well, I'll jump in the ring with you, Jerry, on that. At different phases of my career, I can say I've bumped into obstacles of whether or not I'm experienced enough to step into a role, maybe because of how long I've been with an organization. I tend to be a transformative leader. So as I saw myself growing in my career, my approach to leadership being more situational based, democratic with teams, investing in teams, depending on the organization I was with, it may not have fit the culture. So I would put that in a bucket of value streams. And so what I learned real quick is that I had to do the value stream mapping on what are my core values: diversity, inclusion, equity, understanding compassion, understanding those core values for myself, and looking to see if the organization that I'm with has those similar values, because sooner or later I'm gonna crash into that if we don't. And so I have to understand what I'm willing to compromise on and what I'm not. And I'm just at a period in my career where compromising on what my value streams are is not something that's negotiable for me. So I look for organizations that I can match with, and they can expedite my growth in my career in the right path. And I love what Dr. Howard said earlier around lead, serve, and grow. And that's what I'm always looking for. That's been my mantra as I progressed in my career.
Gotcha. How about others? Any particular obstacles that stand out that you confronted, or maybe even derailers that you remember, and how you dealt with them?
I could talk about an experience that I had in my career where, everyone goes through annual performance review cycles, and the review that I got from my boss wasn't to my liking. There were some things in there that I felt I wasn't sure how fair the comments were. I was in a new position trying to get up to speed, but I wasn't sure how fair. And obviously I needed to change something to change the trajectory of my performance in that position. What I also found was that my boss, didn't give me the feedback that I needed to help. All right, so many of you probably know what that feels like. Okay, well, what do I need to do? What are you suggesting? And it's not resonating with you on what to change. So I actually invited my boss to dinner. I said, let's just go out. Let's get out of these four walls. Let's have a meal. Let's break bread. Some drinks too. Some truth serum. To be honest, that was part of it. And I have to tell you, that changed our relationship. That because he let me know some things that I didn't know he thought about me. He was way more direct in that setting than he was at work. I can't explain why, but that was enormously helpful to me to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to have success in this position? So sometimes you just have to think a little bit outside the box to get that feedback that you need. You may have to be a little bit more persistent. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had that experience and how to navigate it. So that's just an example of how I dealt with it.
I would add to that, in addition to thinking outside the box, it took a good deal of risk and self-confidence for you to be vulnerable like that. As I hear you speaking, would you say that had anything to do with your willingness to be vulnerable?
Yeah. So absolutely. And if I would say, that's one of my, everyone has a superpower. One of my superpowers is I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid to let folks know that I don't have all the answers, that I could use assistance and advice. And I found that, or not everything's perfect going on in my life. I'm optimistic. I'm happy. I'm a confident guy, but I have struggles like everybody else, and I'm not afraid to let people that I trust into that in order for me to gain some advantage. Because I think what that does is when I give a little bit of myself, people are more willing to connect with me personally. And then I develop friends, not just colleagues. And I think that's been very key for me in my travels.
Gotcha. We're coming up on the time when we have invited the audience to submit questions. I'm going to check in with Paul to see if there are questions that we are.
Indeed. Jerry, indeed there are questions, and so far, gentlemen, you've been able to give some really great feedback and advice. One question is, how do you focus and how do you generate intention, right? Any advice there in terms of, helping someone work through the issues around focusing? So that's one question.
Yeah, that's open to the panel. Anyone feeling comfortable enough, please take a crack at that. Developing that skill to be intentional, that risk to be intentional, that ability to be intentional.
One of the ways that I do that is by looking at what I have to do, what's ahead, and putting aside time to think it through and to develop a map of what is it that I need to do, who is it that I need to connect with. And like I've mentioned before, trying to stay 2 to 3 steps ahead of where my job is going, where the organization is going, and to figure it out. And I've had to train myself to do that because that's not in my nature. I'm more of a big picture type of person and not necessarily a detail oriented person. But if you don't pay attention to the details, the big picture doesn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Anyone else that can chime in on how do you go every day about, focusing on about, centering, what your goals are and what your intention is?
I think go ahead, Marquise. So I was going to say, I think it's a little bit about seeing through the forest a little bit and understanding kind of where your North Star is, if that's your objectives or if that's having a vision for your career. Once you've established that and understand kind of fundamentally what those objectives are, what that vision is for yourself, then it's about just breaking down kind of what are the steps each and every day that you need to take to help navigate to get to that point. And I think all of us, from a routine perspective, I would imagine are pretty due diligent in terms of that has led to kind of where we've gotten to in relation to our careers. But with that being said, I think in very simplified terms, I do think it starts with understanding kind of what your objectives are, what your vision is, and then starting to navigate or build out what that roadmap is going to look like as it relates to getting to that North Star and getting to that beacon.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, nowadays, obviously networking looks a little bit different, feels a little bit different. You can't go out to your favorite watering hole or your favorite restaurant like Athelstan did with his boss at that time. And so, the question is, how do you network in this new world? And what are some of the effective ways you found to connect with people still, to build those trusted relationships? And it's a different, right? Between, if it's someone that looks like you and someone who doesn't look like you. One of the questions in the chat, actually, Athelstan, to you was, the boss that you invited to dinner, whether Black or not. And so I think that there's a little bit of difference there as to how you connect even in the virtual world with each other, especially with someone who you don't have that trusted relationship with. So some advice from you all as to how you're connecting nowadays.
Yeah, I'd love to jump on this. So, when I left my last W-2 job, I had 4,000 connections on LinkedIn. I now have 27,000 because I'm very intentional about reaching out to people. In terms of my schools, I really don't talk to HBS people because my response rate for them is about 9% versus my response rate from MIT people is about 30%. And so I've got the data and the analytics. I know exactly kind of where my people are in technology. Now, if I want to go talk about venture capital, private equity, investment banking, I go back to my HBS people. Right. But I think it's about being intentional, being focused on volume. Like, who are the people in your town or who are the people that are in your industry? Who are the people that went to the same school as you do? Who are the people that have the same title as you? In LinkedIn, you can search by first level connection, second level connection, by geography, by industry. It is a tool that enables things to be incredibly easy for you to navigate, and do not pay for Sales Navigator. Do not pay for the premium version. You can get everything I'm talking about for free. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, look, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Snap, I can't help you because I'm not great on those platforms. But I use LinkedIn as a proxy for any of those platforms, including I think it's called Lunch Club, which is a very popular app that's starting to catch a lot of traction. So I'm about to be 50. So if you're 20, you might like Lunch Club and Snap. but I'm an old guy, right? And so I like LinkedIn. And so those are my two.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Anyone else that besides LinkedIn, any other strategies that you're using to network and connect?
That was awesome, Andrew. Thank you. I wanted to just chime in here because I'm actually dealing with a unique situation. Cedric knows, I'm at Tufts Health Plan. We're merging with the Harvard Pilgrim. And so it's obviously, with any combinations or mergers, there's going to be transition, right? And so I'm sort of having to deal with, well, how do I manage that transition? And what does it mean for me? And so, right now I'm very active with trying to get to know folks. And I'm setting up half-hour meetings with different leaders in both organizations, just to try to understand what their vision is for the new company. And then I can sort of explain to them what I think my vision is, or what I think my contribution can be to the new company, as I'm trying to also explore where I fit in this new role. And the thing that I'm finding is everyone is very, very eager to meet with folks because they're trying to figure things out themselves. And, I'm actually, creating a service to them because I'm like advancing their thinking, as well as putting a bug in their ear that I might be the right person for whatever opportunity. And so that's just an example of ways that I'm doing it within my own company and trying to build relationships and new relationships with people that I haven't met yet.
The common thing that you and Andrew highlighted here is intentionality, right? And proactiveness around reaching out to your network, reaching out to folks, connecting with folks. It doesn't happen if you don't make it happen. So, Cedric, Marcus, or Roger, there's a question here that says, the lack of constructive feedback seems to be a common feel for the panelists. Myself and my POC colleagues, is there a theme here, right? And any suggested advice as to how to navigate that lack of constructive feedback?
Constructive feedback. So there's an approach that that I like I said I've leveraged with different organizations I've been with in workshops and things of that nature. But Gervais Bush put out a great approach called Clear Leadership. And I was fortunate enough to be one of his initial pupils, if you will, when he pushed out, and he's based out of Canada. But the clear leadership principle really pushes the conversation in a way that you eliminate mush. Mush is the precepts that I have around the people I see in front of me, how I talk, and things of that nature. And it's based on four things. It's what am I observing? How do those observations make me feel? What do I think about what I'm feeling? And then what do I want? And you just go through that cycle continuously and having conversation. And I think when you're looking to have constructive feedback, you can be a participant. Don't be passive in getting the feedback that you need by doing that observation, feeling, thinking, wanting, and articulating what your want is if you're really seeking to grow. I think we take advantage, or we have this misnomer that the leaders that are supporting us are going to be the ones that give us all the feedback that we need to grow. And in reality, sometimes you're managing up just as much as they're managing you. So consider that as one approach that you can get through your constructive feedback loop that you're lacking.
Marcus or Roger?
I mean, that's I think in terms of constructive feedback, lack thereof, I think it's really about being clear on, again, I go back to, what were your objectives? What were your goals? Or just really trying to hone in on as specific as they can be as it relates to, what's the action or what's the challenge that they ultimately are trying to articulate back to you. I think when you leave a conversation and you feel like you're unclear of the feedback, I think it's incumbent upon yourself to go back and clarify. And so I kind of, want to underscore that, because I do think as we navigate our careers, we all have different roles, and you're going to have different bosses. You're going to own your own company, whatever the case may be. But, you know, when it comes down to constructive feedback, I do look at it in the sense of try to get as specific as possible. Don't leave a conversation in the gray. Make sure you go back and have follow-up questions, follow-up dialogue to specifically understand what that feedback entails and ultimately try to map out what your next step should be.
Yeah, what I would add to that, Paul, is also try to round out that circle that you get feedback from. And what I mean by that is interact with other co-workers. Sometimes when I'm going to do a presentation, I'll ask somebody, I want you to listen for this, that, or the other. And after that presentation, I want you to give me some feedback on how I did, so that I get more of a rounded view of what I'm doing. And it's served me well when I've had some people that have said, you know, you sounded a little angry when you said that, or that particular question, you didn't field it very well. And so that's helped me to kind of round out that picture. Ultimately, you know, it depends on that boss, right, and how they see you. And so for me, it's been seeking consistent information from them. And sometimes you have to be a little bit tricky about it, you know, and ask an indirect question to get that information.
Great insights.
If I could jump in for a minute, Paul, I'm going to say, just to add to what's been said, and as an executive coach, helping folks with their career development, getting feedback is probably one of the most crucial elements to anyone's success, particularly as you move up the ladder. And what's the reason for that? You need to know what it is that you need to know in order to survive, number one, and succeed. Two, you need to be able to demonstrate to the person from whom you're requesting feedback, that you're confident enough about who you are to be willing to be vulnerable, to expose yourself to constructive criticism in order to learn to do a job better. And three, to get from point A to point B is never a straight line, and none of us is perfect. And to have the attitude with you always that there is something that can always be improved ought to be part of your mantra in any job that you do. So get to learn to accept feedback as part of your career growth and development. See it as an essential tool. And in some cases, you'll find that the people from whom you request feedback will be a little bit reluctant. I can't tell you the number of clients I've had who have said, well, I asked my boss for some feedback and he or she said, oh, everything's fine. Well, that's not good enough. That is obviously someone who is not comfortable giving constructive criticism. And you may need to help that person learn by specifically saying, I'd like you to give me some feedback on, am I making my numbers? Am I a team player? Am I communicating effectively? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Be very specific about what it is that you want feedback on when you are dealing with somebody who is uncomfortable with giving feedback, because unless you are getting feedback along your journey, you are just operating blindly. So learn to take it as another tool in your toolbox that's going to help you in your success.
And I'll just one build to that is a lot of us, if you have one-on-ones with a boss or whatever the case may be, you shouldn't wait to the end of the year to kind of have that conversation. You should actually, again, think about being proactive, using that as an opportunity to review your goals, review what you're tasked to do for the year, to have that two-way dialogue with your boss, get that feedback that's needed to ultimately understand how you're scorecarding against your performance objectives for the year. So not waiting to the annual review process, but ultimately being proactive in terms of how you're looking at your one-on-one routines, if you will, with your supervisor or boss, et cetera, to ensure that you're having that dialogue more frequently throughout the course of the year.
Absolutely.
That's right, Marcus, because if you hear something in your annual performance review that you hadn't heard or asked for during the year, that's an example of your inability to seek feedback on a regular basis, because you should not be surprised in your performance evaluations by anything that comes up by way of constructive feedback. That should have been part of the conversation all through the year, or as many times as it takes to deal with it.
So, when I was going to the Next Generation Executive Program, NGE, that was mentioned before by Cedric, Jerry happened to be my executive coach, and he actually gave me that exact advice, and I followed it. And because of that, I don't know if it's directly because of that, Jerry, but I did get a promotion after you said, Paul, feedback is a gift, and you have to be able to take it, discern, see where that intention, the feedback's coming from, not take it personally, right, and act upon it. And I will tell you, I mean, it really is. And some of us, it's harder for some of us to actually give feedback as well. For those of us who are leaders and managers, so that's a good lesson. There's a really good question here from Brian, and Brian's been very active on the chat today, so I want to make sure I read it. And it says, what advice would you give a young professional in the job seeking process when comparing aligning their values with their company versus the desperation of just getting a job? So, how much of a weight do you put on your values and your personal values versus, hey, I need to pay the bills? So any advice there?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So I brought the value stream conversation, and I put it in the room. What I would say, Brian, or others, if you're asking for someone else, is again, you have your value streams, and you're comparing your values against an organization, and maybe not all of those match. But what you really are saying to yourself, what am I good with living with? At least you're going into any situation with your eyes open. So where you are when you step into an organization, especially if that organization doesn't match all of your values. And candidly, mine hasn't been matched with, all of my values are not matched with every organization I grow with, but there's enough that stacks up in my favor in partnership that I'm aware of the others, and I can seek how to fulfill those values in a different way. That's just the conversation that I have with myself. And it also goes back to earlier, and I didn't get a chance to speak on it, was consider your as you're down right now looking at what your next career move is going to be, is make sure you're doing your reflective journaling. So you can capture all the things that you've done in your career, or even if you're getting started, all the things that you've done to get into your career, so you can articulate that when you sit in front of the next person that's going to help navigate your ship.
I just wanted to add to that, to Brian and other young professionals looking for new opportunities. There's power in focus. I've interviewed folks looking for opportunities that clearly were not fits, that clearly just cast a very wide net and looking for opportunities, didn't have a clear articulated answer for why they're interested in the job. And you can often tell who those folks are. And so it's a good question. Do you find an opportunity aligned with your values, or you cast a wide net and just get a job? And I would say, you have to strike the right balance, but there's power in focus. When you define exactly what you want and what you're looking for, you prepare a certain way, and every preparation for every opportunity is helpful for the next opportunity. You can leverage all of that experience and even talk about that experience with different people, and that can help you, as opposed to having a myriad of opportunities that you're looking into that don't really where you're not able to leverage one versus the other. I think focus is helpful, and you should think about that.
That's great. So I think that those were the questions we had in the chat. Jerry, I don't know if you had, maybe we have a chance for one more. If not, we can start wrapping it up, and I'll start to give people instructions for the networking sessions. We have 7 wonderful networking sessions. So Jerry, back to you, and then I'll close it out.
Okay, so originally I had I'd asked Rogelio if he would answer this, but I'm going to ask anyone on the panel, in addition to Rogelio, to chime in on this. And that is, given the fact that we are in I hope, a transition, moving from an era in which diversity, inclusion, and equity are the mainstays of the conversations in most organizations these days, but often at this point sound like words as opposed to actions. By the year 2050, it's expected that at least 47% or so of the workforce will be people of color. Do you have any advice for employers to get ready for that time in terms of their use of and acknowledgement of the value of the resources of people of color in sustaining those organizations' growth? What kind of things would you give advice to employers to do to get ready for that eventuality?
Yeah, I think, Jerry, a lot of it has to do with how they source candidates and where they are sourcing. I've been, as I mentioned, in my career, I've been with some big companies, and it always baffles me that they go to organizations, they go to universities that don't necessarily have a large population of color, and then say, well, we can't find people of color. And it baffles me that you keep doing the same things expecting different results. And there's so many different ways that you can approach the sourcing of candidates. So that's number one, is figure out how to source the candidates that you need. And it's not very hard to do. The second thing is preparing hiring managers who are making those decisions to really be open-minded, to look at the candidates that are being presented to them and to give them an opportunity. And one of the toughest things for a hiring manager is to know the bias that they have and to be able to put that aside so that they can give candidates who are of color an equal opportunity. And until those two things start to happen, we're going to end up in 2050 having the same conversation that we're having today, because I've had this conversation 20, 30 years ago.
Anyone else have any thoughts about advising employers to be ready for that reality?
I think just one aspect is, and it's kind of a loaded question, but I do think one aspect is what I would love to see is corporations start to ensure that they reflect that their leadership teams are diverse. And you start to think about the statistic of 47% of the workforce being people of color by the time 2050. Essentially, they're going to be able to choose or discern, should they decide to accept that offer from a company. And I guarantee you that they're going to look at the leadership team and try to understand if that's reflective of how they look. So I think, as we start to, I think there's obviously a little bit of a wave going on now in 2020, but I do think I would underscore the point of, we have to keep the onus and the focus around ensuring that there's, the leadership teams and the workforce of these companies are starting to reflect the people that they serve day in and day out, and particularly if they want to use that as a recruiting tool to attract top tier talent. Exactly.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I just want to thank all of you panelists, as well as the folks who submitted questions to the panel for having a lively and I think hopefully an informative conversation. The takeaways I would say I've had from this conversation is that the success of the folks on the panel and in general stems from having had a sense from early on in your background, your family, et cetera, folks who were able to help you realize that you can succeed at what you do, having an interest in a particular topic or subject that begins early on, high school, college, et cetera, that you are passionate about and explore, having a vision about your career and a set of values that you operate by, that you can compare the organizations that you want to commit yourself to also have, and so that there's an alignment of those values, and that a tool that you will always benefit by having is seeing the value of feedback. Learn how to accept it, learn how to request it. And finally, I would say all of that is to underline the fact that each and every one of you as participants and the panel, as well as myself, we can be the authors of our own destiny if we put into practice many of the things that you've heard the panelists say today. So thank you all so very much. There's a networking session going on now afterwards, Paul, is that correct?
Absolutely. So thank you again to all of you panelists. Thank you all for hanging with us. I already grabbed my glass. I got my drink ready, and you'll see in the chat, there are all the networking rooms that you can sort of avail yourself to. We have some really exciting ones. So I'll encourage all of you to sort of go and grab your drink, join us in some of the networking rooms. Click on the link, it'll take you right there. I'd like to thank again all of our sponsors. This would not have been possible without all of your help and support. All of the panelists, moderators, you all did a wonderful job. The feedback that we've been receiving has been tremendous. We look forward to day 2 of this conference, which is next Thursday, the 19th, beginning at 2 o'clock until 6 o'clock. And we're going to have a career event there as well. You know, I'm going to raise a glass and I'm going to have a sip. And I will see you all, you know, in one of those networking rooms. So thank you all for hanging in here. Apologies for the technical difficulties we experienced at the beginning of this. We're gonna get that squared away, straightened out. So it'll be smooth sailing on the 19th. So thank you all and see you soon.
Pleasure working with all of you on the panel.
Pleasure.
Take care. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Great job, P. Jerry, Sid.
Honest to God,
Marcus,
I tell you,
Andrew, thank you.